I said to him, Orville, not every story has to have significance, you know? Sometimes a story is just a story. You try to read into every little thing and find meaning in everything anyone says, you'll just drive yourself crazy. Had a friend do it once. Wasn't pretty. We talked about it for years. And then not only that, but you'll likely end up believing something you shouldn't believe, and thinking something you shouldn't think, or assuming something you shouldn't assume. You know?
With the release of Help Wanted 2, the new lore introduced in the game raised quite a few more questions than answers, like most FNAF games. But in the little details of the secret ending, crucial parts of the original timeline were given, ones that we believe can help us solve the overly complicated lore of this game series.
Hi, I'm Cori.
And I'm Connie.
And we just solved FNAF.
Bold words for a first video, Cori.
Shut up. I'm aware of what a hefty claim that is. Ever since the second game, fans have been scrambling to attempt to piece together the lore. Every installment may solve a few things, but honestly just adds more questions. Do we know everything? No, we'd be dumb to claim that.
Yeah, for instance, we just forgot to put the shadow animatronics here. I don't know what the fuck those are.
Yeah! But not only have we uncovered some game-changing details, but revealed long-held fandom beliefs that are, when looking over everything, just plainly not true.
I also want to clarify something before we start. The point of this video isn't just a FNAF timeline video. Honestly, this video is written around two key points and building everything up else around them. You need to understand one before you understand the other. Or, more likely, you need to believe one before you can believe the other. This video's point is to look all the way back, with a clean slate, which is what we did, and start over from the beginning. Get us all on at least a similar, new page, so that we can continue theorizing in a way that actually makes progress instead of going in circles.
First, let's get some disclaimers out of the way. And number 7, we will be cussing in this video. We're not sorry. Fuck shit.
So, insanely long preamble.
For an insanely long essay, our written form is 50 pages long.
Yeah, and that's on you for adding a bibliography. Let's begin.
To begin with, first we must question when exactly Fazbear Entertainment became a corporation. Prior to the release of Security Breach, most fans presumed it began in the 1970s or 80s with the original Fredbear's Family Diner. However, one of the collectibles in Security Breach is a poster for the wonderful Fredbear's Singin' Show. The poster is in black and white, which doesn't mean a whole lot considering the first color printer wouldn't work until 1977, so this only places the beginning of Freddy's at before the 80s. However, we get other important information. First, the drawing of Fredbear with pie-cut eyes, which was a popular style mainly in the 20s to 30s. By the time color became popular in animation, actual eyes could be drawn. So possibly this poster is either from that era or invoking nostalgia for the rubber hose days, which would imply something connecting Fredbear to that time period. But specifically, look at the price on the ticket. 50 cents general admission. When tracking ticket prices, we know that adult admission for carnivals jumped up to $1 a ticket by the 1950s. In comparison, many carnival tickets from the 40s, including the 1939-40 World's Fair, which was less a carnival and more a showcase, but important place, sold for 50 cents. If we can narrow down this poster to any time period, we can quickly narrow it down to the 1940s.
Is this important?
No, I just have friends that like dating things.
I personally think the brand, being as old as the 40s, is unlikely, that it may be older than Henry and William themselves. Maybe it's just a 30-year cycle thing. Nevertheless, we know at the very least that Fredbear's Family Diner began in the 1970s or early 1980s. Fall Fest, which seems to be connected to Freddy's, has a poster for 1970 in Help Wanted 2, which could state that Fazbear as an idea or corporation started around then, but nevertheless, we know at the very least that Fredbear's Family Diner began in the 1970s or early 1980s. The main time we see it is in 1983, where it seems to be an established restaurant. Here's where we enter speculation on the owners of the restaurant. We know for a fact that the co-owners of the restaurants, at the time of the missing children incident, were William Afton and Henry. They don't seem to be full owners of the franchise, which has a company behind it, but whether they started the franchise and sold it or simply joined the company to open restaurants is up to interpretation.
Also note, Henry and Charlotte's last name may not be Emily, as the name was found on her grave in the Silverized, and, well, it could have easily been a middle name. In the Ultimate Guide, she's referred to as Charlotte Emily, but he's just referred to as Henry, implying it may not be a shared name. But it does exist as a surname and does mean rival, so that's what we got for now. William Afton seems to have been the one running Fredbear's, which worked out because his family lived walking distance from the building. It is very likely that their sister location, Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, was also open around the same time as Fredbear's, possibly falling under Henry's jurisdiction. We know this due to the existence of Chica and Foxy toys, merchandise, and television appearances during FNAF 4, despite them not appearing at Fredbear's. Five Nights at Freddy's 3 also references a sister location that was open at the same time as Freddy's, which seems to have closed due to spring lock failures.
After learning of an unfortunate incident at the sister location involving multiple and simultaneous spring lock failures, the company has deemed the suit temporarily unfit for employees.
Hi.
We know for a fact that the main four characters had at least been established by that point: Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy. Fredbear and Spring Bonnie were also established and merchandised with the others, as we see separate Fredbear and Freddy plushies in the crying child's room, and a little kid with a Spring Bonnie finger trap in the cutscenes, who could be Charlie? That's not important.
No matter when Fredbear's was established, we know that the Freddy Fazbear specific brand began in 1983, due to novelty coins you can find, so there's that.
While William seems to have handled mainly business and entertainment, Henry, meanwhile, is confirmed to have been the technician within the franchise, as he later refers to the suits as my creations.
This is supported in the Silverized, in which Henry is stated to be the creator of all Freddy's suits,
including both the endo and exoskeletons, as well as the Springlock variants. The Springlock suits, as any FNAF fan will tell you, are very important to understand. When creating the animatronics for their restaurants, William and Henry decided to create suits that could function as both animatronics and costumes, ones that could perform on stage with robotic movements, but could also be worn as outfits to mingle safely with guests. Thus, the Springlock suits. With a hand crank, the inner machinery was wound back and held against the edges of the suit with the Springlock mechanisms, leaving room for a human to fit inside.
Unfortunately, however, the Springlocks were unreliable, to say the least. Any wrong movement or introduction of fluid such as spilled water, tears, or blood, and the Springlocks would set off, sending the endoskeleton back into place, whether or not someone was still inside. This would cause an intense and painful death. While the instructions tell the employees to find somewhere quiet to bleed out, it's actually more likely that the suits would cause more internal than external bleeding. The pieces would still be in place, holding most of the blood in. However, its piercing of vital organs and arteries could not be understated. It would be a long and painful death, and the owners knew this. As stated previously, it was in the instructions to find a safe place to bleed out rather than frighten guests. In the Silverized, there is a given possibility of surviving a spring locking, as William is stated to have done so, but there isn't any mention of this in the game's universe. I suppose it could be possible if medical attention was received, but that would require the employee to be found and rescued in a reasonable time frame, something that would be hard if they went to the back rooms.
Those back rooms are also important. In the instructions, the safe place to bleed out was noted as the hidden back room in the establishments.
Each Freddy's location was given a secret room, accessible to employees but hidden from all maps and inaccessible to free-roaming animatronics. These rooms are where the murders are going to take place, and where Springtrap will be stuck for a long while, so it's also important to keep them in mind.
A lot of this is pretty dangerous, honestly.
The back rooms were supposedly made for staff breaks, but anyone could see why a hidden room off map would be a dangerous thing to make. And the spring locks? Damn.
I think here we should really just consider that William and Henry were adrenaline junkies. Or at the very least, a bit careless with safety until later events.
I mean, it was the 80s.
It was the 80s.
Yeah, we all know how safe everyone was being then.
Great place to spend the day with your family.
Now, we've discussed Fredbear's and the likelihood of Freddy's being open at the same time. The other important thing to understand about the co-owners at this point is their families, namely their children. If either had a wife, they're not mentioned or important. Mrs. Emily gets a few mentions in the Silverized as having left following Charlie's death, but no narrative significance outside of that. Mrs. Afton is only implied to exist in Security Breach and only vaguely. Henry Emily's kid is easy. Her name is Charlotte Emily, referred to as Charlie in the novels. The novels also reference a twin named Sammy, but like Mrs. Emily, he has no lore relevance outside of being a retconned red herring as to who Henry's dead kid is, and there isn't a single implication of his existence in any other universe. The novels also give Charlotte's age, though it's inconsistent by book. In the first book, she states she was 7 in 1985, which would put her birth at 1978. The fourth closet's gravestone puts her birth in 1980 and her death in 1983. The poppet for Charlie in Help Wanted 2 is also unlocked via a 1983 code, although that may not be a reference to her death year and may just be a reference to the original sister location Easter egg. Either way, we know that at the time of her death, she was incredibly young. Afton tends to grab kids that are under 10 years old. And Afton's got his own family too.
William Afton has 3 known children, Michael, Elizabeth, and the third one who is known in the fanbase as the Crying Child.
Now, I'm gonna be real. We believe we have been told the Crying Child's name, and once we get to that part of the video, we will refer to them as such. Until we get there though, we'll be initializing him as CC.
Michael is definitely the oldest and seems to be in his tweens or early teens by around FNAF 4, which would place his birth around 1970.
As for the other two, we don't have specific years or ages, however I do believe that Cece is actually older than Elizabeth, contrary to fandom belief. The only hint towards her existence in FNAF 4 is when you can walk into her room, upon which her only toy is a broken Mangle. FNAF 2 states that Mangle was created with toddlers in mind, and the toddlers are the ones who take him apart, which implies to me that Elizabeth is a toddler in 1983. This would explain her absence from the plot. She's at daycare or with her parent or parents, or simply too young to be participating in any events.
Another long debate in the fanbase is which child died first. We know Michael died last, but the other 3 are up in the air. To be honest, it seems very likely that of the 3 left, Charlie, Cece, Elizabeth died last. Firstly because, as mentioned, she was likely a toddler in 1983 and would need to age up a little more. We also know for certain, due to the blueprints of the Fun Times, that each robot was made with child luring and kidnapping in mind, and the scooper was made to remove Remnant, which Afton would have no idea about until he started experimenting with possession. This puts Elizabeth solidly behind the other 2. As for Charlie and CC, it's been debated on whether Charlie was killed in William's grief over CC, or if CC was traumatized by Charlie's death. I believe that in Help Wanted 2 and FNAF 6, we are given the information that CC dies first. The Help Wanted 2 information we'll get to when we get to it, but as for FNAF 6...
Midnight Motorist is a very controversial minigame, but with multiple clues pointing to it, it really seems like this is about William Afton.
His change in color is likely to differentiate him from the previous game's Michael sprite. At the time of Sister Location's release, confusion on whether Michael was the purple guy or just a purple guy was at an all-time high. Or it could be because a purple sprite just wouldn't look good against a black background. The secret minigame featured within Midnight Motorist is labeled in the files as Later That Night. Considering the look of the car and the rain texture, it's very, very likely to be referring to Charlotte's death. It's later on the night Charlotte died, after William drove away, but while it was still raining.
The story shows him drunk driving to a place called Junior's that won't let him in, likely a bar that's keeping him from getting more drunk.
The biggest proof of this is the guy standing outside, kicking him out. Pretty likely a bouncer. He has the power to keep him out and is already standing outside.
The important part we need to discuss here is Junior's, because it establishes that later the night Charlotte died, Fredbear's has been closed. The path between Junior's and the driver's house is the same as the path between Fredbear's and the Crying Child's. If Afton is the driver, that makes Junior's the new building occupying what used to be Fredbear's. Junior's was Fredbear's, closed down and turned into a bar. FNAF 2 establishes that Fredbear's was the first location.
We're going to try to contact the original restaurant owner. I think the name of the place was Fredbear's Family Diner or something like that.
This means that Charlotte died at Freddy's and not Fredbear's, like in the books, which can be backed up by Freddy being the animatronic serving cake in FNAF 2 and not Fredbear. But it also means that if Fredbear's is closed, the bite has already happened. The Crying Child was bitten at Fredbear's, and Fredbear's is closed by the time Charlotte died, meaning the Crying Child has to be bitten first.
And thus, the tragedy of the Afton family begins with Cece's trauma surrounding the animatronics. It has never been directly stated why exactly he fears them, though it should be noted that he seems to only fear the robots and not the characters themselves. After all, the plush animals are his friends, especially his Fredbear plush, which talks to and comforts him.
He's here, he's there, he's everywhere. Who you gonna call? psychic friend Fredbear.
It's all but confirmed that Fredbear has his father's voice, as we see a similar Fredbear plush with a walkie-talkie in Aftons' hidden bunker, and his final words to CC, "Let me put you back together," mirror what Michael says his father requested he do with Elizabeth.
I put her back together, just like you asked me to.
Also note that the walkie-talkie near a Fredbear plush in the sister location's secret room implies that the bunker was active and in use during 1983, whatever the hell that means.
Why William is using a bear to communicate with him and not just talking to his kids directly is still a mystery for the ages, and it still doesn't explain the question we just brought up. Why is CC afraid of the animatronics? Originally, the hint given to the fanbase was what is seen in the shadows is easily misunderstood in the mind of a child, and many interpreted this as him seeing someone getting into a Freddy's costume and becoming terrified of what that can mean. I believe we have a different answer, one that was given in the game, either intentionally or not.
In Night 4's minigame, we see that someone, presumably Michael, though it's never stated, has a locked crying child in a room filled with robot parts. This alone could cause a child trauma, surrounded by disconnected limbs, staring eyes, and torn wires. However, special attention should be given to the Fredbear suit. Its head is gone, and something is sticking out of its neck. While those could very well be 8-bit wires, I don't think so. We don't see any wires connecting the head to the body when Purple Guy puts the suit on the guy in the background. Instead, to me, these sprites resemble brunette human hair. It's too blurry to tell for sure, but that brings up a question. Is the crying child locked in a regular parts and service room, or inside Fredbear's secret back room? Even if this knight isn't in a back room, we know that CC has a tendency to get locked places, most likely by Michael, though we can't rule out that it's by William himself. Members of the Afton family would most likely know where the back rooms were, and the back rooms were where the employees were told to go in order to bleed out and die. If the crying child was locked in there, only to witness someone enter in a suit, start twitching and bleeding out, and then die in front of him, yeah, that would sure traumatize the kid, perhaps in a way he couldn't explain to others. After all, you're, 4 to 8 years old? How do you first of all put together what happened in front of you and then verbalize such a thing?
No wonder he's sobbing all the time.
We also know from FNAF 3 that the Springlock suits were decommissioned following multiple simultaneous failures.
After learning of an unfortunate incident at the sister location involving multiple and simultaneous spring lock failures,
we do not see them in action following the Bite of 83, save for the obvious MCI, but even then, the phone guy refers to it as a yellow suit from the backrooms at that point, meaning it's not in casual usage. In the third game, he names it as Spring Bonnie, but says specifically that it's not meant to be used, implying that the FNAF 3 phone calls happened during or immediately following the bite. The crying child's death is only one Springlock failure, not multiple simultaneous. If it's the last time they're used, what happened before? Perhaps if, in a week or two prior to the bite, someone got spring-locked and bled out, it's not exactly simultaneous, but it's close enough that they might have counted it as similar incidents, and multiple instances in a short period of time would be concerning enough to shut down the suits entirely.
Speaking of the Bite of 83, we should probably get to that. Still terrified of the animatronics and potentially having nightmares of them coming to kill him, we'll get to that, CC now hates going to Fredbear's and seeing the robots, preferring to cry under the table rather than face them. This is unfortunate for him as it's a family business and he's there a lot. In the week leading up to his birthday party, set at Fredbear's, he's barely able to function, shown in at least one incident collapsing on the ground and having a breakdown when faced with an animatronic suit. It should also be noted that during this time, neither CC nor any of the other children appear to be going to school. This could place CC's birthday and the bite at some time in the summer, or during an autumn or spring break. As we'll discuss later, the missing child incident, or at least the end of it, is stated to happen on June 26, although the year is unspecified. This is something we should keep in mind when we get there.
Michael, as a tween-age older brother going through his angsty phase, is not at all sympathetic to his brother's plights. Instead, he prefers to aggressively bully him, mainly via jump scares while wearing a Foxy mask, and presumably locking him into rooms so he doesn't have to deal with him. We also know that at one point he literally goes home without the crying child, leaving him at the place he hates the most. CC doesn't seem very popular outside of his family either. While we see a few kids neutral towards him, asking him to play or simply talking to him, others are antagonistic immediately.
It's at this point I want to talk about William's actions. Quick trigger warning for discussion of child abuse for the next 2 minutes, but right now we've got William supposedly communicating through the Fredbear plush rather than actually, parenting his kids. While I can't speak on whether this was intentional at this point in the timeline, William is, at least through inaction, encouraging infighting among his sons. He doesn't seem to punish Michael for abandoning his brother, locking him in rooms, and scaring him to tears. The plush's words aren't even comforting. It's just, oh, your brother's coming. Did your brother do something again? Get jump scared, it builds character. The reason I bring this up is that now we're going to talk about common abuse tactics. Fun! When an abuser has multiple victims, it's a very common tactic to turn them against each other. This is because simply, if the victims are fighting against each other, they don't have the time or energy to fight the actual problem, which is, of course, the abuser themselves. This can be seen in either forcing the victims to compete for affection and good treatment, convincing each party that the others are the enemy, all that jazz. And once again, it may not be intentional. Not every abuser goes around saying, I think today I'm gonna gaslight my wife. But when an abuser has control and they want to keep it, they will do whatever it takes. Whether or not William was an abusive father prior to the bite of 83 is unknown, but it is something we should consider. Presuming he is the driver and midnight motorist, we know he later falls into abusive tactics, implying physical abuse, at the very least verbal. He does nothing to comfort Cece and does nothing to solve the root of the issue, which is Michael's behavior, which could also easily be read as a cry for help. Many abused children, not understanding why they feel the way they do, take out their anger and frustration on others, because they can't or won't do so to their abusers. Michael's actions could be a dumb teenager phase, or mirroring actions that have been done to him. It should also be noted that if William was abusive prior to the bite of 83, this does not exclude him from loving his children, or at least thinking he does. As hard as it is to understand, many abusers do believe that they love their victims. They do not or cannot process the fact that their actions are causing their victims pain, and that their love is a desperate desire for control, that they see their victims as possessions rather than people. And with William's major control freak issues, this would be an easy trap for him to fall into, even without trying. End trigger warning.
Whatever the reason, Michael's bullying escalates until Cece's actual birthday party. With several of his other friends, all in Freddy's-themed masks, the tweens surround the crying boy and decide to prank him by pushing him to give Fredbear a kiss. Cece is screaming and begging for them not to, but we see them cross the entire restaurant, carrying him over to the stage and then shoving him in the mouth. And then the mouth bites down.
We see the bullies stop, staring in shock and horror, and the crying child stops moving.
This is the infamous Bite of 83, the date known due to an advertisement for Freddy and Friends on Cece's television, and the code to see the FNAF 4 cameras in sister location, and it is what kills the crying child. But not immediately.
We know from the final cutscene that Cece does not die right away. He slips into a coma where we hear Michael tearfully apologizing just out of his field of vision, while Fredbear/William promises to put him back together, before we hear a flatline. So at some point, Cece was in a coma at a hospital, hence the flatlining. This can also be seen in Easter eggs during the FNAF 4 gameplay. On occasion, the bedside table will have a pill bottle, flowers, or just be replaced with an IV drip, implying that the gameplay is the nightmares that the child is having in his coma before he succumbs to his wounds. Possible. There are other interpretations we will get to later. The real question is, how long did this take? And more importantly, what happened between the bite and the death? Well, the missing children incident.
The missing child incident forms the foundation of practically everything in Five Nights at Freddy's. It was canon even in the first game, where Cawthon wasn't even planning a story, let alone a decade-long lore-heavy franchise. Yet, much like many things in FNAF, information on it is scarce.
First of all, the books give the year it occurs as 1985. However, in The Truth About the MCI, Bon Swooch makes a very good argument for the game incident occurring in 1983 instead, which would put it very close to the bite. The movie seems to put the incident in 87, but that may just be setting up date weirdness. Nevertheless, we have no canon year, only vaguely 80s. We do have a specific day and month, though.
The first game tells us the story through rare, hard-to-spot newspaper clippings, which confirm the incident occurred at Freddy's and that there were 5 missing children. And it's confirmed by this point that after they were lured away, the killer stuffed their bodies into the animatronic suits. However, something that is not brought up enough is what else the newspapers tell us, specifically the first one.
Kids vanish at local P's area, bodies not found, 2 local children were reportedly lured into a back room during the late hours of operation at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza on the night of June 26, while video surveillance identified the man responsible and led to his capture the following morning. The children themselves were never found, and are presumed dead. Police think that the suspect dressed as a company mascot to earn the children's trust.
3 things here that people don't bring up enough. 1. The end of the incident, at the least, occurred on a specific date, June 26. 2. The final 2 MCI were killed together. And 3. We know they're the last 2 because someone was identified and arrested the following morning.
The next newspaper then says that following this arrest, 5 children were eventually linked to the incident, and they have confirmation that a man dressed in a mascot costume to lure them to a back room. The newspaper also says that the man was charged and convicted. Specifically, the headline says,
5 children now reported missing, suspect convicted.
We know that then Freddy's remained open for several years after, only to close when no buyers wanted to be associated with it. The last newspaper specifically refers to the MCI as the tragedy that took place there many years ago. We also know for a fact that Afton was the murderer. However, the question of whether he was the one arrested and convicted is a big one, because the answer to that has to be a no. He was active in the company by 1987 at the least, and still the manager and robot designer for the fun times. Feel like a convicted child murderer would get axed pretty quickly in the company. So someone was caught on camera, arrested, and convicted. But not William. We'll get to who we think it was in a moment.
As for the children themselves, we know the names of 4 of the 5 children who disappeared. This is specifically through the 3rd and 6th games. In the 3rd game, the bad ending shows 5 animatronic heads positioned specifically, each with 1 glowing eye, with the exception of presumably Fredbear, who has 2. Upon completion of Pizzeria Simulator's Lorekeeper ending, we are given a shot of a graveyard on a sunny hill. The first 4 graves are positioned in an eerily similar way to the heads in the above shot, with the 5th obscured by grass, and the 6th high up on the hill above them. The names that can be seen are Gabriel, Fritz, Susie, and Jeremy. 2 of them were identified as missing children in the 4th closet, which released the following June, ironically, June 26. Gabriel's name was confirmed in the later graphic novel adaptation. With additional information that Susie is Chica, which we'll get to in a minute, we can very easily place the tombstones along the heads and confirm that Gabriel possessed Freddy, Fritz possessed Foxy, Susie possessed Chica, and Jeremy possessed Bonnie. The 6th grave, up on the hill, is presumed to be Charlotte Emily's, as the blurry name seems to match in length and shape, and it matches her puppet characterization of watching over the other children in death. The other 2 missing children in the book series are a girl with long dark hair named Cassidy, and a young artsy boy named Michael Brooks. What's important to note there is that neither of them are named Jeremy. As Michael Brooks is confirmed as the novel's possessor of Golden Freddy, it seems likely that Cassidy replaced Jeremy as Bonnie's possessor in that universe. It should also be acknowledged that the writers of the novels, Cawthon and Breed Risley, would have known that the books take place in an alternate universe to the games by this point. Cawthon was of course in charge of the franchise, and apparently decided to write in Charlie as the puppet around then. I feel like these graves were part of the confirmation that they take place in separate universes, as if the 5th obscured grave was supposed to be Michael Brooks, that leaves out Cassidy, and if the 5th obscured grave is Cassidy, it leaves out Michael. It would have been very easy for Jeremy's grave to read Cassidy, but I really feel that adding in a different kid was a specific nudge that the novel MCI are different from the game's MCI. Just keep in mind going forward that while having 3 of the same missing children per universe pretty much gives us confirmation that the above picture is meant to represent those kids, the novels can't be used as a factual basis for all MCI information.
We don't know a lot about the missing boys, but we actually have a lot of information on Susie. For instance, in Ultimate Custom Night, a glitching withered Chica will claim,
"I was the first. I have seen everything."
This, combined with her gravestone being first in Help Wanted 2, seems to imply that she was the first of the missing children. Then we actually see her abduction earlier in Pizzeria Simulator. The game Fruity Maze, when it lights up, shows the reflection of a young blonde girl in a purple dress excitedly playing the game. As she continues playing, though, more fruit is replaced with the sprite of a dead dog, and music starts being replaced by the sound effects of a car collision, as her reflection gets more upset. When the 3rd game is completed or lost, we see Spring Bonnie hovering behind her, and the text,
"He's not really dead. He is over here. Follow me."
With this, a story emerges. Susie's dog had previously been hit by a car and killed, and William used this information to lure her to the back room where she became his first victim. We have similar cross-continuity confirmation that this is Susie via the Fourth Closet graphic novel, where she is depicted as looking exactly the same. In the original book as well, she mentions that Bonnie helped her find her puppy, so this is as confirmed as it gets that it's Susie.
Susie also gets characterization in the Fazbear Fright series, though interestingly in that she is given a completely different physical appearance, with long brown hair and brown eyes, a completely different outfit, and no mention of a dog. Though the game Susie descriptor matches up quite a bit with the doll she and her sister share, Gretchen. That is pretty weird, though from interviews with the co-authors we can gather that a lot of the contradictions to canon were based on a lack of information given to them. In the Fazbear Frights universe, Susie is still a missing child, and specifically the one connected to Chica, so we can consider this another cross-continuity confirmation. Susie is the only universal constant, apparently. Following Susie would have come the other children, and only recently have we been given a definitive order. In Help Wanted 2, when the player reaches the end of Princess Quest 4, they encounter the graves of all the children of the happiest day. Only by lighting them in the puzzle's correct order can the secret Bonnie mask be located. This parallels the original Princess Quest games, in which you have to do the same thing in order to release Glitch Trap, but the developers of Help Wanted 2 specifically chose to put the missing children's poppets here, identifying these graves as theirs. This really implies that the grave order is the death order, and with Susie as the first, that gives us an order: Chica Susie, Foxy Fritz, Freddy Gabriel, Bonnie Jeremy, Golden Freddy, and Puppet Charlie. This surprised the fanbase a lot, because most of us had assumed that Charlotte had died before the missing children. Henry refers to William's kills as a wound first inflicted on me, and in the novel trilogy, Charlie dies 2 years before the MCI. But it looks like we were wrong the whole time. Or maybe it got retconned, who knows. Or maybe the puppet was always meant to be after the MCI, and the only retcon was that it was the game universe's Charlie. The latter would make sense, as Henry's kid's death in the novels is described completely differently, with the toddler being kidnapped from a linen closet by Spring Bonnie, rather than stabbed outside by a non-disguised William Afton. Sammy may not have ever been meant to be the puppet, just some random other dead kid. Charlie dying last also explains why the children are already dead for Give Gifts Give Life, when she arrives to give them the masks, and why she stuck around in the first place, which will be discussed more in a later section.
But I'm sure you all noticed something interesting. When naming off kids for the gravestones, Connie didn't name Golden Freddy, did she? And many of you will be saying, but we have a name. Let's take a look at the security logbook. Released just a few weeks after Pizzeria Simulator, the Five Nights at Freddy's Security Survival Logbook is mostly a little puzzle collection, but holds some very important lore information. Firstly, it practically confirms that Michael Afton is the same character as Mike Schmidt, the first game's security guard. He writes his name as Mike in the logbook, meaning he's a security guard named Mike, but he references enough specific sister location stuff to make it clear it's Michael Afton, namely The Immortal and the Restless, Exotic Butters, and Casual Bongos. The second thing it confirms is a certain name. Throughout the book, there are two spirits that seem to be communicating with each other, one through faded text, scribbling notes in the margins of the pages, and another by altering the pre-existing text into their responses. We will call these spirits Faded and Altered for now. The thing is, we know for a fact that Altered is the crying child. Faded frequently asks if they recognize drawings of the crying child's toys and references his party specifically. Altered's responses, namely "the party was for me," line up with the questions and show that the second spirit is indeed our CC. As to who Faded is, well, on several pages Faded wrote the phrase "my name." One of these is specifically on a gravestone, and with the book's close release to FNAF 6, it was immediately supposed that this was revealing the name on the 5th gravestone. On each of the My Name pages, the page's numbers, or other numbers should the page number be obscured, are incorrect. Upon collecting all of them and going to the word search, the numbers can be used as coordinates to locate letters, which spell out, very clearly, Cassidy.
Is why. So, that comes up with the name Cassidy. Cassidy. So, the hidden code of this book is a name, and its name is Cassidy. Remember that, guys.
Other phrases hidden in the word search, which are not supposed to be there, are "it's me," "who are you," and "what is your name."
Very quickly, a conclusion was drawn by the entire fanbase, that being that Cassidy is the name of the 5th missing child, and the one stuffed into Golden Freddy. But in talking to the crying child, we also have more information on them that changes everything about this kid. One of the specific things that crying child says is, "I can't see," which brought to attention the Fazbear Frights books, though those released 2 years later, but I digress. Within these books, there's a continuing story at the end of each novel referred to as the Stitch Wraith Stingers, in which a possessed animatronic is causing destruction wherever it goes. This is meant to tie together multiple fright stories, but the important thing to the Cassidy interpretation is the Stitch Wraith itself. Within the Stitch Wraith are 2 children's souls, Jake and Andrew. While Jake died of a brain tumor, Andrew is a vengeful victim of William Afton. He is very specifically the vengeful spirit of the Frights universe, made explicit in the Manor Room 1280, where he is keeping Afton in an eternal nightmare despite attempts to either revive or kill him, solely to make him suffer. This, of course, brings to mind the vengeful spirit of Ultimate Custom Night, who will be discussed in more detail in the Ultimate Custom Night section. But we know the vengeful spirit is a victim of Afton, keeping him in an eternal torment. Now, it's not Andrew in the games. While I know this is controversial in the fanbase, it's pretty clear that several Fright stories take place in an alternate universe, and the Stitch Wraith Stingers are some of them. Namely, just because of 2 little things. Into the Pit and the Man in Room 1280. Into the Pit establishes that the MCI victims were never missing, but found pretty easily. While you might think Oswald seeing the kids all propped up with party hats was just for dramatic effect, it's confirmed in the final story Year of the Band that this was intended to be the actual way the kids were found. In the games, rather famously, the missing children are missing, their bodies never located. Certainly not in such a gruesome scene. Meanwhile, the man in room 1280 is dying from burns. Of course, Scraptrap was in the FNAF 6 fire, but he was long dead by that point. William Afton died of a spring lock failure in a hidden backroom in the 90s, and then was trapped there without food or water for potentially decades. The fire isn't what killed him. He would already be dead by the time the fire got to him. Ultimate Custom Night in the games is hell rather than the Nightmare of Frights. Right, sorry, Cassidy. So, having these 2 specific souls in one spirit, causing problems on accident across the series, has several parallels to Fated and Altered's conversations in the book. Specifically CC's I can't see, as specifically Andrew cannot see while Jake can. Meanwhile, Andrew is more in control of the endoskeleton's power supply. If, say, there were 2 spirits in Fredbear, then CC could be the one who couldn't see but was more in control of the suit, and that line could point directly to that interpretation. Though it should be mentioned that they have these specific movesets because Jake possesses the Wraith's mask and Andrew the battery, and I'm not sure how that would work if 2 kids were both possessing the same entire body, but well, anyway. The 5th missing kid is definitely in Golden Freddy. We see this in Give Gifts, Give Life and Happiest Day. But if CC is in there too, they'd have to be stuck together. Thus it would work like Andrew and Jake's possession of the Stitch Wraith, with a difficulty maintaining control between it. It would also explain why Fredbear is so glitchy and mysterious. There's 2 confused souls in one body, and why he's got 2 glowing eyes in FNAF 3. There's 2 souls in there instead of just 1.
And with Andrew as the vengeful spirit interpretation, this also points to Cassidy being the vengeful spirit of the games' universe. If CC is Jake, then Cassidy is the Andrew parallel, and, well, UCN is very specific Golden Freddy imagery. Mainly in the final cutscene unlocked after completing 50/20 mode, where a non-withered Golden Freddy can be seen twitching in a black void, interpreted by the fanbase to show the vengeful spirit as inside Fredbear. The twitching Fredbear is what Afton sees when he faces the one he shouldn't have killed. That would make Cassidy the vengeful spirit, angry on behalf of her fellow victims as well as herself. She is the one holding Afton in hell, and possibly the one who has to go back to stop the Mimic in the second arc, though that's very debatable. The Princess and Princess quest was labeled in the files as Cassidy, but this was later changed after being noticed. With other important file names being kept, such as Charlie Door, this seems to imply that it was never supposed to be viewed or wasn't meant to be a clue. Or, well, it's possible that Princess represents Cassie, but that's a whole different ballgame. The thing is, well, this all brings up a certain question. Why Cassidy? Why is she the one William shouldn't have killed?
'Cause, he shouldn't have killed anyone, just in a general sense. So obviously the title isn't referring to morality, but to the fact that this victim was one who was inevitably going to come back and kick his ass. And not to sound like Mystic Hippo here, but what makes Cassidy so special? Some people infer from the Toy Chica cutscenes of UCN that her death was the last and therefore the most brutal, as Toy Chica's last kill is stated to be worse than the others. But that honestly doesn't make sense to me. the more violent to kill, the more vengeful you are? Is that the logic we're working with? It's not exactly how it works.
True, she could just be a more justice-oriented child than the others, but even then, what purpose does this serve narratively? Why is random kid number 5 the big good who gets to hold Afton in a torture chamber?
The missing kids, as you can infer by the fact they barely have names, are more plot devices than characters in their own right. Which is fine. Sometimes in writing you just gotta focus more on other stuff than characters whose purpose is to be there and die. But then why is the 5th one so important? So important that she's the one stopping our big bad. So important that she gets to haunt alongside CC and communicate with him in the logbook.
And that's where we get to the big question.
The one that Cori asked me the night I did my own read-through of the security logbook. One that changed everything.
Is the logbook telling us that Cassidy is communicating with the crying child, or that Cassidy is the crying child?
Newsflash, asshole! I've been
Cassidy.
the entire goddamn time!
Alright! Time to get mauled by the entire fan base. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Stick with us. This is groundbreaking, I promise. The Cassidy we just discussed for minutes show on screen is not canon. I think a lot of us have forgotten this, but all of the above is speculation. She may be the spirit talking to Crying Child. She may be a parallel to Andrew. She may be the Golden Freddy Kid. She may be the Vengeful Spirit. None of that is ever spelled out in canon.
To be fair, very little is. For instance, we don't actually have textual confirmation that the crying child is an Afton. We just have to assume from his connections to Michael, Afton's connections to the FNAF 4 house and the Security Breach family of staff bots. Staffton bots. But the thing with Cassidy?
This little girl is not the Vengeful Spirit. She is not Fredbear's possessor. She's not even one of the missing children. The Vengeful Spirit, as will be discussed later, is someone else, and Fredbear's possessor, and the last missing child, is the crying child, Cassidy Afton.
And you might be wondering, but he didn't go missing, he died? We'll get there. Let's look again at that logbook code. Yes, the hints on each page are from Faded's writing of my name. This led us all to believe that the name in the word search was, well, Faded's name. But Faded didn't make that code. Altered did. The coordinates are given via altered numbers, with the last couple being provided by Michael Afton himself, as we can tell with his red pen. And the word search is all altered text. The name is found through altered text, and the other hidden messages, it's me, who are you, what is your name, are altered. None of it is in Faded's writing. Faded does write on the next page over, and that would be a great opportunity for the authors to establish that this is Faded's name, but they don't. Faded instead writes, underneath a mirror, what do you see? Faded asks on that page, when you look in a mirror, what do you see? And Altered responds, it's me, Cassidy.
But, you say, Cassidy was a different character in the books. She was a little girl. Yes, she was. And you know who else was in the missing child incident and in the novels? A boy named Michael. Michael Brooks, who isn't canon to the games either. Instead, Michael is William Afton's son, and so is Cassidy. Neither Michael nor the crying child are canon in the novels, with Elizabeth appearing to be the only Afton kid in the trilogy, so their names were repurposed for the missing children. Michael Brooks and Book Cassidy are not the children who died in the games. Instead, they have the names of the missing Afton children in the narrative, Michael and Cassidy Afton. Jeremy, being a missing child named in the games and not the books, when they were written around the same time, was cluing us to look at the names of the two who didn't appear in that image.
Not to mention that the Fazbear Frights parallel argument doesn't work. Jake and Andrew have specific sight and touch powers because of their placement in the body, so I can't see having a point towards CC having less control than Cassidy is, as we say in Fazbear Frights, Stinger Moot. Also note that the Stitch Wraith doesn't speak until it's only Jake in there. The only other time in these books we see two souls possess one animatronic, Rosie Porkchop in Together Forever, the animatronic very conspicuously uses plural pronouns to refer to themselves, your ladies in waiting. Which is interesting seeing as Golden Freddy's only and very iconic line is in the singular. It's me. Not us. Just me.
As for the two spirits in game, the other glowing eye and Fredbear, that's not Cassidy. That's Charlie. Again, stick with us for a sec.
Think about the Happiest Day minigame. We see 6 spirits there, the 5 missing kids and Charlie, and when the game is completed, all 6 lights go out. Most people explain away the second Golden Freddy kid not being in Happiest Day by saying Cassidy is already torturing Afton in hell. But that means her soul hasn't moved on like the others have. So if her soul hasn't moved on, why does her light go out? The lights going out symbolizes them moving on. It's because she's not the 6th spirit. Instead, it's Charlie, the 6th person here, who moves on only after she's sure all of the other children have too. And why is she represented by a light in Fredbear's eye?
Really interestingly, in FNAF 6, when the puppet is finally trapped within an animatronic, it's within a Freddy animatronic with one visible eye, one golden eye, named after the left eye that is visible. Charlie is the left eye of that FNAF 3 cutscene. This is also reflected on her grave on the hill, being placed behind the other children and up to the left. The 6 spirits in Happiest Day were always the 4 missing children, Charlie and Cassidy Afton.
The glowing eye is the only hint in the games of 2 spirits in Fredbear. If it's supposed to represent CC and Cassidy, why are there no hints towards 2 Fredbear souls literally anywhere? Hellpointed 2 really kicked off this interpretation in our minds. They have 6 graves, 6 poppets, and 6 Voltron figures. They could easily have had the Fredbear figure split in half, or 2 Fredbear poppets, or something like that. But they didn't. Because there's only one Fredbear spirit.
This of course brings up the question of who Fated Text is. If Altered is Crying Child and Crying Child is Cassidy, who's Fated? It isn't Michael, he writes in red pen, and given that he provides 2 of the coordinates, it's safe to assume he was aware of the spirits trying to communicate, making him a third party. Also implies that he recognized the second spirit was trying to spell out his name and was trying to help him remember it.
The Fated Text then has to be someone who knows the Crying Child.
First of all, think about it. When does Mike fill out the logbook? He's definitely the security guard for the first game and the 6th, with the others a bit more up in the air. All we know is this book takes place after Sister Location, since he references it. And if entered as the Molten MCI, that would place this logbook also after the first game, because assuming the pieces of the original animatronics were in the fun times, see Henry's He Took Everything From Them Again, then FNAF has to take place before Sister Location. Now, Immense Andrew brings up in the survival logbook is still important, and it changes FNAF 3, that this book could very well take place during the 3rd game and might be revealing Michael as the Night Guard. It shows basically the biggest evidence we have on that theory, with Fazbear Frights' office being illustrated in the book with Foxy as the Night Guard. The more modern lingo also implies that this is a more modern book, which would put it in the timeline of 3 or 6. FNAF 6, meanwhile, has a decent basis as well. This would tie into their close release dates and adds a bit more context to Michael drawing his own gravestone when asked where he will be in a year, since he knew where this restaurant would end up. So then, what does that leave us? With the candidates we have for Fated, we're pretty sure that this book takes place in FNAF 3. The Fated Text is most likely Charlie, trying to prompt Cassidy to remember himself for the happiest day. If it takes place in FNAF 6, then it's probably William, who is trapped inside of Scrap Trap.
Because in FNAF 6, Scrap Trap is no longer just Spring Bonnie. As pointed out by Stormmister in his video, I Found a Reason for Afton to Look So Weird, the muzzle and feet of Scrap Trap are not Spring Bonnies. Rather, they are Golden Freddy's. Stormmister points out it's very likely that these pieces were picked firstly to repair himself following the fire, but secondly, possibly, in hopes of taking away the animatronic mode's programming that makes him leave to follow audio cues, to give himself control back of his own body. It appears that after the FNAF 3 fire, Scrap Trap pieced himself together with some of Fredbear's pieces. And as we know from the fun times, moving the metal moves the remnant. When ripping apart Golden Freddy, whatever spirit was inside was put into Scrap Trap. And Scrap Trap may or may not have ever realized that.
There's something else too. Scrap Trap would have known where Golden Freddy was at this time. Because we were also told where Golden Freddy was, and didn't realize. In finding out where Golden Freddy was, we get more evidence that it did not hold a 5th missing child, but rather the soul of Crying Child only. Remember Night 4 of Sister Location? In it, we're trapped in a springlock suit by Circus Baby, who simply says it's from her old pizzeria and was never used, or at least, not in the way it was supposed to. Said springlock suit is never identified, but here's the thing. Sister Location happens right after Freddy's closes, and springlock suits were discontinued long before Freddy's closed. They were discontinued after those multiple simultaneous failures in 1983. why would they build another one for circus babies? And if so, why only one? If springlock suits were coming back into fashion, why only make one springlock and not the others? And if it's an old suit, we know Fredbear's only had two mascots, Spring Bonnie and Fredbear.
Right now we have two specially designed suits that double as both animatronic and suit.
They were the only springlock suits, and they were both used. But not at circus babies. If Elizabeth was a toddler when Fredbear's closed, she wouldn't remember those suits being in use, and Circus Baby herself barely has Elizabeth's memories at this point. Most of her consciousness is of what a robot itself saw. If Fredbear and Spring Bonnie were moved to circus babies, they wouldn't have been used, considering it closed day one after Baby scooped Elizabeth. They'd also be old suits, having been collecting dust for a few years now, so she wouldn't think they'd been used at all. At least, not in the way they were supposed to.
In Help Wanted, we see 4 Endo-01 skeletons in the furnace, leaning heavily towards the molten MCI theory, which is that Afton broke the original animatronics down, melted them into Remnant, and injected them into the Fun Times, which is why they're like that. But there's only 4 skeletons and no Golden Freddy suit, and no Spring Bonnie. He carted the original 4 over here, so why not them? They're not in the molten MCI, meaning we're in one of these 2 suits.
And Spring Bonnie's suit can't be the one we're trapped in. When Afton crawls into it, it's just laying in an abandoned Freddy's back room. Doesn't look like it's been moved in a long time. Certainly not to circus babies, which only leaves one Springlock suit we could be inside of. Yes, that's right. In Night 4 of Sister Location, Michael Afton is shoved into the same suit that he shoved his brother into. He is in the Fredbear suit.
It's just big enough for one person to fit inside. But just barely.
Look at the faceplate. Compare it to Golden Freddy. The hole for the smile could easily fit the animatronic's muzzle, and more importantly, the suit has no eyes, just holes, just like withered Golden Freddy, eyeless with an open smile as the jaw falls. Now even compare it to the trailer footage from Into the Pit. Look at the eye shape. It's the same mask. Girl, you have the same fucking face.
Also, if you ask about the face opening up, the other animatronics do that too. The Fun Times aren't special. In an interview with Dawko, Scott Cawthon said something interesting about this suit.
So here's an interesting one, which I don't know if you're gonna answer or not. So in Night 4, when we're inside the suit, a lot of people wanted to know whose suit is that.
Whose suit is that? I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to answer that for you.
That's fine.
That's gonna have to remain a topic of discussion.
If it was just a new animatronic, why not just say that? Because it's not. It's Golden Freddy, and knowing that would have spelled out one very important thing. If Michael was in Golden Freddy for Night 4, then there is no body in there. There is no missing child inside.
We know for a fact the other 4 missing children are literally inside their respective animatronics. The animatronics smell like death, they release blood and mucus. Their bodies were hidden there and never moved. So why would Fredbear be different?
Because Fredbear was never meant for any random child. It was always meant for Cassidy Afton. Cassidy Afton was the 5th missing child.
First, let's once again bring up the order of deaths in Help Wanted 2. Susie Chica, Fritz Foxy, Gabriel Freddy, Jeremy Bonnie, then Golden Freddy Kid, then Charlie. An argument can be made the crying child may have happened afterwards, as the Bonnie mask is found after the graves are all lit, but we must remember Midnight Motorist. The bite, which would have been represented by the mask in this interpretation, needs to happen before Charlie dies. CC isn't the mask, he's the plush. Something we have to remember right now is that the crying child doesn't immediately die from the bite. He's in the hospital for some time. He's alive long enough for Michael and William to talk to him, and for William to promise to put him back together. We think that William took his son out of the hospital, either pulled a parent card and said he needs to be at home to recover, or maybe he just smuggled him out. Maybe he did that at the beginning and shoved him in that nice little underground bunker with all his toys in it. Or maybe he does this on the last night. We're not entirely sure. It's not really that important. What we are sure about is that while CC is in his fun little coma, William starts killing, because he's practicing, learning how to put them back together.
In Tales from the Pizzaplex, it's shown that the material of Remnant, at least the owner's own, has healing properties. If he knew or was discovering this, maybe that's what he was after.
After shoving Susie into Chica to hide her, Chica starts acting strange. While Susie isn't fully possessing the suit, it's still being a bit erratic, twitching at random intervals. Perhaps her agony is already inside of it, keeping her pain inside while her remnant wanders, as seen in Fazbear Frights, when Susie wanders her home all day, then disappears with the spirit of Chica at night. But Chica's still acting weird. So William tries the same thing with Foxy. Kill a kid, shove them inside. Henry has set up a safeguard, a security puppet to make sure children don't leave the area, and specifically to make sure his own daughter, Charlotte, is safe. After one disappearance, you can't have any more, can you? But his flaw here is thinking that someone is luring the children out of the location. William is working on the inside. He kills Fritz. He's starting to figure out that the remnant of dead souls may be able to attach itself to metal. Or maybe the suits are just acting weird because there are bodies inside of them clunking up the motors. He's gotta try again. Only this time, now that the puppet didn't work, we have cameras.
The final night, he lures Gabriel and Jeremy together. The last two to go were Freddy and Bonnie, which tracks. In every game, in every restaurant, it's you and me together forever and ever. Of course they died together. And when he killed them, either he thought he'd figured it out or realized he'd been caught on camera and was running out of time.
When we look at Fredbear's twitching cutscene in UCN, the soundtrack titles the scene Void, pay attention to the way this bitch moves. First off, it's an undamaged Fredbear. It's not Golden Freddy yet, and it's far from withered. It's a Fredbear in its prime. You know where else we see this twitching? In the original trailer for Five Nights at Freddy's 3 with Springtrap. Showing possession, right? Perhaps. You know what else it may be showing? Let's look at a very specific instance in the books. In Fazbear Frights 1:35 a.m., in the short The New Kid, when Kelsey gets into the Golden Freddy suit and gets spring-locked.
And the sound wasn't the bad part. It was bad, yes, but the bad part, the really, really bad part, was the way the suit started jerking in a spastic, horrific dance. It looked like the moth-eaten, mildew-blotched gold bear was convulsing, but it wasn't the bear. Devon knew it wasn't the bear, it was Kelsey. What did I do? Look at it, it's still moving, he's still alive, we have to get him out of there. Devon glanced at the suit, it kind of pulsed, like it was a large, bloody heart getting in its last beats.
This shot isn't just showing that the suit is possessed. The other suits are possessed, but don't twitch like this, because they're not springlock suits. The same twitching can be seen in the film when William is in the back room, dying from his springlocking. This shot and the FNAF 3 shot are shots of someone being springlocked, and the void shot of Golden Freddy is Cassidy's springlocking. Cassidy was placed into the Golden Freddy suit, and whether intentionally or not, spring-locked. This kid was taken off of his life support, put into his worst nightmare, and made to suffer one of the most horrific deaths imaginable. William watches Fredbear do this horrible twitching as Cassidy, whether awake or not, dies, and then the suit goes still. And when it doesn't move after long enough, William concludes that it didn't work. Which, oh shit, it, quote-unquote, didn't work. All of this was for nothing. But now he has a whole new problem. He can't just say Cassidy finally died in his coma. Look at his body. If it hadn't been completely ripped to actual shreds like in Together Forever, it's mangled beyond belief. Not a single person is going to look at that and think those were from the coma. Everyone's gonna know something's up, and considering at least one other person has been springlocked in the past, the wounds might be recognized. Henry would recognize the wounds and identify them. They see these wounds on Cassidy, they'll realize he was stuffed into a suit, and possibly begin to look into the others.
William panics. He'll leave the other children where they are to rot in the suits, but not his son. Instead, he takes the body out. He removes Cassidy and puts his body in a box. To hide his failure, his horrible crimes, and to put his son somewhere he might be able to grab him should he actually figure out how to put him back together, he buries his son in an unmarked grave in the woods.
The strange pile of dirt in Midnight Motorist. The next day then, the police search the Freddy's security cameras for Gabriel and Jeremy. They see them being lured away by someone in a spring Bonnie suit, and come to one conclusion. It has to be one of the owners. Now that the springlock suits are decommissioned, they're the only two who would know where the suits are and how to use them.
But when they get to William, he tells them that not only was he definitely totally home all night, but his son is missing too. His son, who was sick and dying, disappeared, or got kidnapped. How awful, how tragic. And so, who gets arrested? Henry. Someone was arrested the night after the final 2 MCI went missing, and was later connected to the 5 disappearances. Obviously, Fritz and Susie were tied in, but the 5th kid was William covering his own ass. He let Cassidy slip into the missing child incident, hiding not only the fact that he knew where Cassidy's body was, but that he himself was the killer. He can't be the murderer now that he's a victim himself. He's one of the grieving family members of a lost child. So, Henry, the only other person who can operate the springlock suits, is arrested. And convicted.
Don't forget, the second newspaper in FNAF says that the suspect was convicted. As we stated before, it couldn't have been William, who still had control of the franchise in the years following the incident. But Henry? Not only would he be just as suspicious as William once they knew about the springlock suit, Henry disappears from the game's storyline until FNAF 6. He disappears for roughly 30 to 40 years, depending on when FNAF 3 takes place and when the MCI would have happened. It's not because he just left. He was arrested, convicted, and imprisoned. Henry unwillingly took the fall for William in the missing children incident.
And, following his arrest, what happens? His daughter is shunned by the other kids. Whether they exactly know or understand what's going on or not, they know her dad used to be in charge of the place and is now under police custody, and he's the reason all those other kids went missing. So they bully her, and, one fateful night, lock her outside.
Now Henry is imprisoned, and can't be there for her. The security puppet is trapped in its box, and the kids lock Charlie outside, not wanting the killer's daughter at their party. Charlie, meanwhile, just wants to go back in. Then William drives up.
William's drunk. He killed 4 children, and for nothing. Whatever he was trying, he ended up with a dead end, or at least 5 dead ends. He has to pretend that Cassidy is just missing and that he didn't bury him alone in the woods, that he didn't kill 4 children and let his business partner take the fall for him. Utah is a death penalty state. Henry will most likely be put on death row for this. And for what? For Cassidy to just die anyway. He drives up to Freddy's in his drunken stupor, and he sees Charlotte outside the building, locked out. His rage and anger at himself and at Henry, the man who built the animatronic that bit his son, takes over, and he does one final kill. He murders Charlotte Emily in the alley. He's not hiding her body, though. He doesn't care anymore. He just leaves her outside in the rain and drives home.
In this, he may have saved his own ass once again. When Charlotte is inevitably found, she won't be chalked up to a victim of the same killer as the MCI. The death is completely different. She wasn't lured away, and her body was found. It'll be chalked up to a copycat or a vigilante hoping for vengeance on Henry. It won't prove Henry innocent. If it's a different killer, then they can't say we must have gotten the wrong guy, seeing his kids are still dying. Charlotte dies, and Henry is still in jail for it.
Later that night, Afton drives home. He tries to see Michael, only to find he's escaped to that place. And what is that place? The gravesite. How Michael discovered the unmarked grave is unknown. Perhaps he saw on the night his dad buried it, sneaking after him when he stopped to grab a shovel. Maybe he saw his dad visit once and started to piece together what it was. Or maybe, just maybe, Cassidy was trying to show him. Unbeknownst to William, his plan had worked. Cassidy's soul was now tied to Golden Freddy, but it wasn't like the other souls. It was confused, volatile, because the soul was separate from the body now. The body wasn't in Golden Freddy, it was buried in the woods. Golden Freddy appears outside of Michael's window and beckons him to find him. It's not the actual suit, though. It's physical enough to leave prints, but the suit itself doesn't move. Think of the scene in the 2023 film where Golden Freddy's ghost is present enough to kill Aunt Jane, but also gets into the house without breaking the door, if you notice. It vanishes like it's not a real suit, but sure hits like one. It can suddenly appear and disappear. In the same way, the game's Fredbear ghost works like this. It appears outside Michael's window in a somewhat stable function, while the actual suit is still sitting in a back room.
Michael's starting to suspect that his dad may not be as innocent as he appears. He wonders why his father wasn't paying enough attention to Cassidy and how Cassidy got snatched. If he was, in a coma. If he's even connected to this at all. Then he starts seeing apparitions of Golden Freddy and starts following it. Maybe he knows it's a ghost, maybe he thinks it's a manifestation of his own guilt. But he follows it and goes to a place where his father was digging one night and tries to find his brother's grave.
William is angry at Michael for going to the gravesite. If anyone sees him and figures out what he's doing, William's fucked.
They'll know Cassidy is buried in the woods and not missing, and William's story will start to fall apart. William's caught Michael near the grave before, and he knows Michael suspects something is up. So, knowing Michael ran off to that place again, he vows that he's going to regret it. He's going to regret digging into his father's sins. The box holding Michael's brother? Left forgotten, for now. As for Michael, well...
Let's talk about the nightmare gas! In Tales from the Pizzaplex's Didophobia, we see a young boy trapped in a makeshift house, made to appear realistic via hallucinogenic gas being pumped into the room day in and day out. He believes himself to be reliving the same day over and over, not processing the repetition. At night, he has horrifying encounters with the nightmare animatronics, but upon the gas being diluted, he realizes the house is bare bones. The animatronics are just puppets, and he's been here for far longer than he knew. He was kidnapped and put into an experiment on fear, which automated itself after being abandoned. He realizes that he is in a hidden area of the sister location bunker, and after trying to call for help, hears a tape of likely Afton convincing him to turn the gas back on and go back to his delusion. Is this true to the games? Possibly. If you look in sister location, there's tanks of unlabeled gas literally everywhere. There's at least 3 in every room. Pumping the place full of nightmare gas would explain quite a few things about it. And the nightmare gas experiments explain the connection between the FNAF 4 house and sister location, as seen in the latter game's custom night, as well as the fact the FNAF 4 house does not match up with the crying child's house as seen in the cutscenes.
When looking at the contents of the scooping room in Ruin, which may or may not be the same room, it's debatable, but it was definitely heavily inspired at the least, you can find several cans of nitrous oxide, which is being actively pumped into the room. Nitrous oxide is indeed a hallucinogen, which can make you disassociate and, in rare cases, cause out-of-body experiences and delusions. So the nightmare gas could just be nitrogen, but there is one caveat that it works mainly as a sedative and laughing gas, which would make someone calmer and less prone to nightmares. It's literally used to induce euphoria, which is the opposite purpose of the nightmare gas, which makes it highly unlikely that it alone is our gas. It could be used in the nightmare gas formula or machinery, but it's definitely not the sole culprit. There are many, many other uses though, which will actually be discussed later. That being said, a certain amount of these stories could be seen as equivalencies more than fact. Similar to Candy Cadet's stories, more of them as a different possibility in a different universe. Things are ever so slightly off to show that this isn't the same one as the games or the novels. Things are swapped out and changed. It very well could be the nightmare gas was this kind of swap, while our nightmare animatronics are the ones with the novels' series illusion discs that people have claimed to see on their endoskeletons. Whatever method, they're not the crying child's dreams, they're experiments. Experiments now on Michael. William was experimenting on a lot of things and trying to find immortality or bring his dead son back or whatever. Why he was experimenting with child fear seems weird to me, but if I'm right and he was trying to produce Remnant, that could be the cause. Or, more likely, he was getting agony.
Agony in the books is a powerful source. Eleanor is a living being made solely of agony. And in case you don't know the Fazbear Frights lore, when the soul dies in a close enough proximity to something metal, Remnant is the good memories, agony is the bad, and that's what causes objects to go haunted. Anyway, Taggart was doing experiments on making a living thing just out of agony parts. If Afton discovered Remnant, he probably discovered agony too, and decided the nightmare gas was a great way to test this shit out. And well, fuck it, might as well test that gas on the kid who's digging a bit too far, both literally and metaphorically. Also, if Afton was freaking crazy even before Cassidy died, could explain what the sister location bunker was doing active in 1983 with a Fredbear plushie. We might already have kids down there. When Michael gets home, still unable to find his brother's body, William takes him on a father-son trip to his little secret bunker. How do we know Michael got nightmare gassed? Once again, we look to the security logbook. On one page, faded text asks, "Do you have dreams?" On the same page, Michael sketches Nightmare Fredbear. Only someone who'd been through FNAF 4 gameplay would know what Nightmare Fredbear looked like, because he went through these experiments, and the nightmares persisted well into his adult life. He has dreams of the same halls, of the nightmare creatures with teeth in their stomach, teeth everywhere, the teeth that killed his brother now coming for him.
How long he's there is questionable, but I don't actually think too long. We know as an adult he has his own house that's in a neighborhood and not in the middle of the woods like the Afton house, and his neighbors seem to recognize and like him, so he's not in that chamber forever. If he's Fritz Smith in FNAF 2, he was out by 1987. Likely Will just kept him there for long enough that nobody would notice, or as long as William just wanted to experiment for. When Michael comes out, he's terrified and more traumatized than before, and he knows what will happen if he keeps questioning his father. So he shuts off, tries to keep living and keep going. He's fallen back into trying to get his father's approval as a trauma response to the abuse he's been going through. Even before the nightmare gas, William was coming home drunk just to yell at him. As Oswald does in Into the Pit, when nobody can tell his father is now a murderous yellow rabbit, he decides to play along. Michael tries to please him, to make him happy, and pushes any and all doubts aside. If he starts questioning, he has to live in a nightmare again. Or possibly the nightmare gas literally gaslit him into thinking he was just hallucinating the whole time, and his father is now the only person he can actually trust. Either way, his dad has full control of him.
We mentioned later that we believe Michael was Fritz Smith, and it's basically confirmed he's the guard for FNAF 1. We know for a fact he was the later guard of Sister Location. All three of those, I believe, were as errands for his father. I think he's under the same level of control that Vanessa is in the 2023 film.
And help me clean up the mess that you created!
He pretends to be a normal adult, he acts as though he has his own life, but really he's always just doing what his dad says. He can have his own house, sure, but he has to come when his dad calls. And why wouldn't he? He's been gaslit and gassed at the same time. Part of him understands just how dangerous his dad really is. The other part just wants his approval after all this time. For now, though, Michael has just become another tool of his father. Something that makes William very happy. For now.
Now, when does the rest of our story continue? 1987, when they realize the animatronics actually are haunted. Because of Charlie.
Was that the bite of 87?
When Charlie died, the puppet escaped its box and found her in the alley. Not waterproof, though, the rain made it malfunction and crash on top of her, and her spirit attached itself to the animatronic. When it was repaired and put back inside, she woke up. She was in the pizzeria, and she could tell that she wasn't alone. And it was in Charlie's nature to protect the innocent. She could have moved on, but not while there were still children there who needed her. She recognized the souls inside of these animatronics like hers was, and decided to stay for them. It might have taken her a while, though, to figure out what exactly to do. The souls weren't in the animatronics exactly. They were wandering, like Susie in Fazbear Frights, going between places that were familiar, but always coming back to Freddy's. But Charlie wasn't wandering. She had full control of the puppet that had crashed atop her. Then she figured out it had to do with the bodies. Back to Tales from the Pizzaplex. In the same book as Didophobia is Alone Together, in which possession in the FNAF universe is basically explained to us beat for beat. Most importantly for this, main character Travis's grandmother tells him,
"Most ghosts linger around the place they died, especially if their remains are undiscovered. They travel around the places that are familiar to them."
The story shows that ghosts will wander, confused and lost, until finding their own body. Upon seeing themselves, they will suddenly become whole instead of broken and scattered. Their memories of their death return, and they understand where they are and what has happened.
Charlie Puppet figures this out, and then figures out where the bodies are. In the Give Gifts, Give Life minigame, she's not putting masks on dead children. Quite the opposite. She removes the masks and shows the ghosts their own bodies, stuffed into animatronics. They're able to remember who and what they are. And now they're able to fully possess the animatronics. No longer wandering spirits, they fuse themselves to their robot bodies. All except for Cassidy Afton. Charlie finds Fredbear, still left in the back room with Spring Bonnie. He's possessed, like the others, but unlike the others, something is different. Cassidy is there, but he's confused and wandering. He's only half in that bear, half somewhere else. Never quite able to bond. He can't even move the suit from its slouching, sitting position. Just make it twitch a little, the more uncomfortable he gets. Charlie Puppet realizes that she can't help him, because his body isn't inside of him. She can't give him the life that she gave to the others, because his body isn't here. So while the others become more in control, Cassidy slips away. He's been trying to appear to Michael, begging him to find him, but then Michael stops responding. So Cassidy just has to sit in that position, waiting, wandering. The main 4 animatronics, meanwhile, are now fully possessed, but even then, the ghosts are a bit confused and lost. All they know is they fear adults, as any adult could be the one in the spring Bonnie suit that had killed them. So they start attacking night guards, adults who are alone in the place, much like Spring Bonnie got them alone. And during the day, they just stare at the adults, trying to figure out who is the enemy. Freddy's closes. It's been years, and the place still can't shake the tragedy that happened there. But a second location opens, a little while away. This is the FNAF 2 location.
What exactly was happening there, by the way? We know there was an investigation going on. Phone Guy says in his calls to night guard Jeremy Fitzgerald that there's something tragic going on out there that totally has nothing to do with them, Pinky promise.
Oh, hey, before I go, I wanted to ease your mind about any rumors you might have heard lately. You know how these local stories come and go and seldom mean anything. I can personally assure you that whatever is going on out there, however tragic it may be, has nothing to do with our establishment.
Then he says that an investigation in the restaurant happens, and they may have to close for a few days.
Okay, so just to update you, there's been somewhat of an investigation going on. We may end up having to close for a few days, I don't know. I want to emphasize, though, that it's really just a precaution. Fazbear Entertainment denies any wrongdoing. These things happen sometimes. It'll all get sorted out in a few days.
Then it's, the building is on lockdown, nobody is allowed in or out, especially concerning any previous employees, and they are trying to track down the original owner of Fredbear's. He also implies that the day shift guard is the one who's gotten himself banned, as the position just became available.
From what I understand, the building is on lockdown. No one is allowed in or out, especially concerning any previous employees. When we get it all sorted out, we may move into the day shift. The position just became available. We don't have a replacement for your shift yet, but we're working on it. We're going to try to contact the original restaurant owner. I think the name of the place was Fredbear's Family Diner or something like that. It's closed for years, though. I doubt we'll be able to track anybody down.
The next day, Phone Guy tells Jeremy Fitzgerald that the place will be closed for a while following this last birthday party, because someone had used the yellow suit in the back, causing the animatronics to go haywire.
The place is closed down, at least for a while. Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it. Now none of them are acting right.
So what the fuck does any of that mean?
So, the Fazbear Corporation, after the inevitable closure of Freddy's, decides to open a new location, but this one will be safer, more high-tech. William may have been out of the franchise for a while, but he has to get back once they start talking about using the old animatronics. He can't let that happen. There's fucking bodies in there. So he says, outfit them with new tech, and then says, these guys are just so ugly. Let's just make new ones. The corporation lets him do that, so long as he uses parts from the originals to make the new ones. They gotta save costs as much as possible. William does that, but as he does, he starts noticing things. The suits, both old and new, are moving, and they really don't seem to like him. The new animatronics are given technology to recognize criminals. This shouldn't bother him, he's not a convicted criminal, but they still are wary of him. Even after the animatronics are complete, they're acting weird towards adults. And so is the puppet. He eventually takes a night guard position under a fake name to investigate further. Yes, he's big in the company, but the local manager communicates with the corporation, not him specifically.
We're gonna try to contact the original restaurant owner.
And it's there that he realizes the truth. It did work. The animatronics are possessed. He can find immortality here and or bring his son back. He's probably lost the plot by now if he even had it to begin with. But now he's fucked up a bit more. In taking apart the original animatronics, he split the souls inside, like they were before they found their bodies, but worse. The animatronics are now even more confused and erratic than they were at the first location. He took the souls apart like the toddlers did to Mangle, and it went just about as well. Once he realizes the night shift is a bit too dangerous, he's all alone after all, he switches to the day shift, and he decides to experiment some more by killing more kids. He's nothing if not frustratingly consistent.
Whether or not any children actually died in the FNAF 2 location, or if this is just a metaphor for the first incident, is a debate within the fandom.
The only evidence we have is in the final FNAF 2 minigame, where Withered Freddy wanders the location and sees bodies scattered around, along with the other Withereds. Is that supposed to just represent the MCI, or is it the DCI, a dead children incident? We think the DCI did happen, but William's experiments weren't working. He didn't shove these kids into suits, just killed them to see what would happen. He didn't use the spring Bonnie suit yet, though. That's still in the back rooms. Instead, he lures them with that fucking bastard balloon boy.
Has anyone ever asked what Balloon Boy's deal is? Is he possessed? Did he get parts of the Wizards? Did he just appear out of the ether and we don't question him lest he damn us to hell for our transgressions? Wrong. He's a lore. We know by the time William got to the Fun Times, he made Funtime Foxy specifically as a lore. They are shown to have, quote, parental voice sync and replay, as well as variable scent release. The specific notation of parental voice really shows what this was supposed to be for. It was to lure kids with their parents' voices or appealing scents. What this tells me is that William learned, likely from being caught on camera with Gabriel and Jeremy, that he can't be the direct lure. It's too dangerous. He's too likely to be caught. So he starts using animatronics to do it. But instead of starting with Funtime Foxy, he starts with Balloon Boy, a childlike, smiling boy who gives out presents to the kids. He gives them balloons, specifically something the kids would love. And he has very specific voice lines, one that kids would recognize and hear. Either they hear Balloon Boy laugh in another room and wander off to get balloons from him, or they straight up think he's another kid and wander off to go help him. And then they get grabbed. Heck, this is probably why Balloon Boy can walk, so that he can lead children directly to the Afton. And possibly him stealing the Night Guard's batteries keeps them from figuring out what's going on, making him a lure and a distraction. Or maybe he just wants
his sweet, succulent AA batteries.
And he might not just be a lure for the kids, he could be a lure for the animatronics as well. Recall in FNAF 3 that his voice lines are the ones that are used to lure Springtrap from room to room, to activate his sound-seeking sensors. This pre-recorded voice, put into Balloon Boy, serves as a lure for the children, and a lure for the animatronics to keep them away from where William is doing his work.
This is also, we should note, his purpose in the Twisted Ones. Charlie is lured to a specific area by his calls, thinking a child is in danger, and then is attacked by multiple wind-up balloon boys as the illusion discs ramp up. He's a lure in the books, and he's a lure in the games. That's what Balloon Boy's deal is.
But the lure doesn't work on the puppet, which Phone Guy notes is always thinking, and it can go anywhere. Likely William figured out the puppet was Charlie around this time and that she was more aware than the others, as she hadn't been split into parts. So he set up the music box to keep her quiet and keep her in one place.
So William is grabbing more kids, but not putting them in the suits. Personally, I think the reason for this is that there wasn't room. There's too much high-tech stuff in the toys, there isn't a large chest cavity to shove kids into. That's why the Fun Times are specifically designed with the shape of a curled-up child inside of them, to make sure that the DCI waste doesn't happen again. But anyway, this starts up rumors and investigations. The new Freddy's opened and now there's more kids going missing. It has to be connected to the company. Investigations begin and the animatronics notice. They're still in pieces, but they realize kids are going missing, and they figure out it's the security guard. Phone Guy says they've started acting aggressive towards the staff the day before the day shift position becomes available. The same day, the building is put on lockdown. I believe that the morning of Night 5, or at least right after Night 4 ended, the DCI bodies were found, and they were found by the animatronics. The Save Them minigame shows a Freddy being led by the puppet throughout the place, seeing all the bodies, as well as watching Fredbear appear and disappear while avoiding the purple guy. Once the bodies are located, then the animatronics can do their job. Retrofitted with safety equipment, part of those have to give them the ability to contact police if they see a criminal. And this isn't just a guess. When Mengele enters the room, we can hear specifically them channeling into a police radio. They can reach the police, and when the toy animatronics see a fucking bleeding dead body in front of their stage, they're gonna contact the fucking cops. The day shift guard is immediately put under suspicion, since either he didn't notice all this kid killing or was the one doing it, and William quietly slips away. He was under a fake name, they don't know it's him. Heck, they're now trying to contact the original owner of Fredbear's, which is him. Or Henry, who's in jail.
They're going off on an appropriately named rabbit trail, looking for someone who doesn't exist. The important thing is he has more information on his experiments, and he knows the possession is working.
Day 6, meanwhile, hell breaks loose. The animatronics were in free roam mode, and they see a yellow suit in the back. We really have two options here. Either someone used Spring Bonnie, and everyone went nuts upon seeing their killer, or the Golden Freddy suit was what was moved. Both are likely. If Spring Bonnie was in that location, then obviously someone using that suit, heck, maybe William hiding out from the cops and then trying to escape without being spotted, would set off any and all MCI sensors. However, Fredbear is just as likely. We see it appear and disappear in the Save Them cutscene, so Cassidy is active, though likely as confused and lost as he was before. He also doesn't seem to be moving the suit, just teleporting in a slouching position, probably just projecting images. This also ties into the idea that he's still not fully possessing it. He's tied to it, but without his body being found, he can't make full use of the possession. Either of these suits could have been what set the animatronics off, enough that the place is completely closed down by night 6, Phone Guy says. But they've got one more thing to do. A birthday party scheduled for day 7. Why this is still going on is unclear.
My current theory is that the news of the bodies being discovered hasn't been made public yet, and the police have cleared enough of the area to see if the killer would come back for this last pre-scheduled birthday. Killers love to go back to the scene of the crime, which is why police stake out those places as well as victims' memorials. So they stake out Freddy's. All Jeremy Fitzgerald is told to do is wear his uniform, stay close to the animatronics, and make sure they don't hurt anyone.
Well, that backfired.
The next day, at the birthday party, one of the animatronics takes a nice little bite out of Jeremy Fitzgerald's head. The building is ruled completely unsafe and closed down for good. They let the animatronics run around for one more night under the eye of Fritz Smith, who was immediately fired come morning for tampering with the robots that just put someone in the hospital. And then they pack them up and decide that the toy animatronics will be broken down and used to repair the originals. Why? Probably this was a William decision. He knows what he did after all, and now he has full access to the possessed animatronics to continue his experiments with. He'll just put those wizards back together and see what he can do with those.
As for Fritz Smith, probably Michael. Biggest evidence for this being that he is fired for the exact same reasons as in FNAF 1, animatronic tampering and odor. Michael is a stinky, stinky boy, and we all have to remember this. But how would he get that job so fast? Phone Guy tells Jeremy they don't have his replacement on the night before, and custom night is the night of the bite. Did he come in and apply while the bite was happening? While the place was closed down for an active crime scene? Can't be after, because they scrapped the toys after. No, I think what this is another part of William's chess match. He has his son go in and, like Vanessa does in the film, clean up his mess. Mike is found tampering with the animatronics, but what he's really doing is hiding the last evidence his dad left behind. He's under a fake name just like William was, but under William's influence as head of the company, he can slip in and out as if he's been an employee this whole time. And when he disappears, just like William, nobody will find him again. William also knows that it's time to be more low-key, so he begins working on his next experiment.
It's after the closure of Freddy's that Circus Baby's Pizzeria is opened, but it's only open for a day. Why? 'Cause Elizabeth fucked up by dying, that's why. It's the late 80s, possibly early 90s, and William is ready to continue his experiments. He's got the original animatronics shoved up in the old Freddy's location, watched over by night guards to make sure they don't escape. In the meantime, he begins work on the Funtime animatronics. They're built specifically to capture children, as seen on the blueprints. They all have technology fitted in solely to serve this function. Funtime Foxy was already mentioned, but Ballora is given deter and misdirect remote activation, showing that she was meant as a distraction, most likely to any adults in the area. Funtime Freddy and Circus Baby both have their spaces to store children in their stomachs, as well as sensors in order to count the children and adults in the area. Freddy specifically has parental tracking, as well as voice mimic/luring, similar to Foxy. These are the full intentions of these things. They are made to kidnap children, and it's specifically for these death experiments, because when we see the blueprints of the scooper, we see it specifically equipped with a remnant injector and remnant reservoir. William fully knows about remnant now, and he's working to inject the Funtimes with as much of it as possible. But the animatronics only work for one day. Circus Babies opens with a party, and Elizabeth Afton attends.
William, knowing how dangerous this stuff was, told Elizabeth to under no circumstances go play with Baby alone. So of course she goes to play with Baby alone. She doesn't understand the danger of these animatronics after all. Cassidy died when she was a toddler, and these are her daddy's creations. How could they be bad? Then she ends up alone with Baby, and Baby does what she's programmed to do. Kidnap any child left alone.
But it doesn't work. Baby fucks up, or Elizabeth fights too much, or something wasn't programmed properly. Or maybe she was programmed to kill immediately after all. Because instead of just kidnapping her, the scooper inside of Baby brutally kills Elizabeth. William immediately closes the restaurant, claiming this is due to a gas leak. And hell, maybe it was, if he's got nightmare gas laying around after all. People started reporting seeing strange things around the place. Just as William brings the fun times back to his nice little bunker, he realizes that Elizabeth isn't gone. Baby's eyes have gone from blue to Elizabeth's green. The experiments are working. He's put Elizabeth into Circus Baby. But he needs to learn more. See, Elizabeth is in Circus Baby, definitely. But she's not Elizabeth. Not quite. She doesn't remember him. She barely remembers anything. That won't do. He can't just have his daughter's soul living on. He needs his daughter. It's also possible that this is why she has what appears to be a Mimic 1 chip. She wasn't acting right, so he wanted to program her to, but that's a whole discussion for another time. The Mimic! So Willy Boy starts renting out the animatronics as a cover, while still doing experiments and figuring out what's going on. As he does, he realizes that he's forgotten something important. His last remaining kid, Michael. Michael's an adult now, and he's either moved out or was kicked out. He has his own place in a nice neighborhood where the residents seem to like him, but he's still under his father's influence. He's not in the bunker. We know that from his message to William that he had to be told where it is. But where he is Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. He took a job at the old Freddy's, working as a security guard after the disappearance of Phone Guy under the name Mike Schmidt, but his tampering with the animatronics and his depression stinkiness was noticed and reported. Maybe he was indeed starting to rebel a bit by figuring out what was happening with them. Maybe he was trying to retrieve parts for his father's experiments, and only after this all went down did William pull a T. Hanos and say, "Fine, I'll do it myself." It's mainly a good chance that he was actually obeying Phone Guy's last request and checking in on the animatronics for, more bodies. But more importantly, just before he gets fired, Michael starts seeing Cassidy again, appearing as Fredbear. Cassidy is appearing in and out of his field of vision, screaming, "It's me." Cassidy has been a wandering soul for maybe a decade now, and he's probably forgotten himself, but he recognizes Michael. He recognizes his brother, and he's screaming, trying to get his attention. Michael, however, doesn't mention this to his father. Last time he saw Golden Freddy, he got nightmare gas fun time. But it doesn't matter anyway, because he gets fired and William gets notified.
William decides to cut the whole security guard thing over there. Can't have anyone else tampering with the animatronics after all. He'll take care of Michael, and he'll take care of the animatronics. First, he makes sure Fredbear is safe in the bunker. Now that Cassidy's hidden, William can't just leave the animatronics there alone, so he goes, night by night, and rips them apart. Lures them to the back room they can't enter and tears off their limbs one by one. And once they're ripped apart, he can use those parts to advance the fun times. He can use their remnant to advance the fun times. He starts injecting the remnant of the missing children into the fun times, but in doing this, he fucks up again. When making the toys, he still knew which parts went where. Now he's melting down all of the children into one glob and splitting it up again, breaking the souls into something confused, angry, and even more hostile than before. But this time, they recognize him outside of the spring Bonnie suit. They remember him as the FNAF 2 day guard, and they know who he is and what he's done. Baby's been injected with some of the remnant too, and she has little to no memories of being Elizabeth.
Something happened when there was one. A little girl, standing by herself. I was no longer myself, and I stopped singing. I still hear her sometimes.
She knows Afton as the guy who's shocking her and forcing her to do things she doesn't want to do.
Sometimes I don't understand why people do the things that they do.
They're all hostile to him now, and it's not safe for him to be down there. But he still wants to fix Elizabeth. So, well, time to kill two birds with one stone. Or more aptly, kill one bird to resurrect another.
He goes to Michael. He goes to his son, his little precious baby boy that he totally 100% loves so much, and tells him that he can make up for the sins of his past. He can bring back Elizabeth, put her back together. All he has to do is go down there and fix her. Go down there and get himself killed. He knows the Fun Times want to kill him. He knows they're going to mistake Michael for him. Michael's an adult now, and he looks a lot like his dad. They'll attack Michael instead, and either he'll fix Elizabeth or die trying. Michael, of course, jumps at the chance. Michael wants to believe his dad, and more than that, he wants to believe that he can bring his sister back. Bring both of his siblings back. He started this with his prank on Cassidy, and now he can fix it.
In the meantime, William goes back to the FNAF location. And by meantime, I mean this could have happened literally any time between sending Michael off and FNAF 3. He's ripped all the animatronics apart by now, but he could use the extra parts. And more importantly, it's time to finally go back for that spring Bonnie suit. Why else would he be in that back room specifically? Golden Freddy's not there. Spring Bonnie is. What he doesn't expect is to see ghosts there. The MCI are mostly in the Fun Times, confused and lost. You know who isn't? Charlie. Charlie is still the puppet, and she's pissed. She was here just to protect the innocent, and William's taken everything from them again. Taken their lives apart, broken them when they had finally found themselves. Now, the question of what exactly happens in William's death minigame is vague. The MCI are in the Fun Times by now, so how could their ghosts be there? We know they're in the Fun Times, as in the FNAF 6 Insanity ending, Henry talks specifically about how William took everything away from his victims again. We know William made the Fun Times because of the dialogue at the beginning of Sister Location, and that he was alive right before Sister Location because the animatronics recognize Michael as him.
Is it the same person?
So how do these timelines cross? How are the ghosts there and not there? Is it possible he dies post-Sister Location after Enter escaped and split from Baby? Okay, but the MCI are just as confused within Molten Freddy as they are within the Fun Times. They might be somehow less aware by that point. How are they supposed to astral project over to Afton? To be honest, the correct answer is probably Cawthon didn't think this part through because he was making up the lore as he went along. LMAO. But from a Watsonian perspective, I see 4 options. 1. Charlie managed to get just enough of the ghosts in one place to piss off Afton. 2. Cassidy has already projected images of Fredbear to people before. Maybe he or Charlie are projecting those images to scare the fuck out of him. 3. These are the agony remnants of the kids, while only the remnant was taken away, which would be complicated. 4. Afton just snuffed some nightmare gas prior to his death and is hallucinating literally all of this. Nightmare gas sure is handy! But I do believe that Charlie is the 5th ghost that confronts William, not Cassidy. Cassidy is still wandering and lost. And at this point, he's shut off completely. Cut off from the world, hidden underground, he has nowhere to wander except his own mind.
Cassidy relives his fading memories over and over, walking between home and Fredbear's. Home and Fredbear's. Fredbear is everywhere. Fredbear is always watching. And at night, he wanders the halls of his father's bunker, hiding from monsters that aren't there, that he's already become. What I believe Didophobia, Coming Home, and Alone Together were trying to tell us was that FNAF 4 may have been Cassidy reliving the events leading up to his death. Susie goes through the same wandering phase, highly detailed. So does Travis. But instead of actually wandering, Cassidy is reliving, wandering the same halls like Rory, and always managing to, like Susie, return to Freddy's, and then start all over again. His spirit is attached to the suit, hidden away, but his body is elsewhere, and he's stuck wandering, waiting to be found.
But the point is that at some point, William gets to FNAF and starts seeing ghosts. He begins freaking out. He's been experimenting with spirits, but he hasn't seen any yet. He's seen moving animatronics not fully realized specters of the children he murdered, especially Charlotte. He had no reason to kill her, it was fully in cold blood. And in that cold blood, he created the puppet, who brought all of these killer robots to life. The ghosts are after him now, and he doesn't know what they can do. He gets into the Spring Bonnie suit still in the back room, hoping that it will either scare them into submission, or fool them into thinking he's one of them. But the spring locks have gotten way worse over the years of neglect, and upon laughing once, William is spring-locked and killed, left to bleed out slowly in an abandoned, locked back room, with the ghosts of his past staring down at him.
Michael, meanwhile, is having just about as fun of a time.
No pun intended.
These animatronics have put their heads together and gotten themselves a great old plan. Disembowel the guy who's hurting them, wear him as a skin suit, and get the hell out of the bunker that's electrocuting them over and over. They're like 7 years old. They don't know that bodies decay. This is a great idea to them.
Remember the multiple gas cans of nitrous oxide in Sister location?
There are some technical reasons it could be there. It's got many uses, including in mechanics, pumping it into pipes, using it in active machinery, but the fact that it is shown specifically in ruin is raising several alarm bells that it is important. Mainly that it is being pumped directly into the room, as seen by the smoke Cassie runs through. The question is, of course, why would they be pumping the gas into the scooping room? So, one of nitrogen's usage is food preservation. It keeps organic material fresh, which can include human bodies. Liquid nitrogen specifically was used in the first cryogenic freezing and preservation in 1966. Now, again, why would they be pumping a body preservative in the scooping room? Were the Funheims planning to preserve Michael's body? Well, no, they took that body out of the scooper and planned to never return. Also, they didn't build the nitrogen pipes, they just kind of lived down there. So what was it for? Well, you know who William was actively trying to bring back specifically in the bunker? Elizabeth, who is trapped inside of Circus Baby, a possessed robot with a weird fascination with the scooping room.
I wonder, though, if you were a freshly opened pint of ice cream, how you would feel about something with that name. Thankfully, I don't think a freshly opened pint of ice cream feels anything at all.
We see Circus Baby's exoskeleton in Night 5, no body to be seen, and no signs of decay like the original animatronics. Is it possible that, after Elizabeth was captured and mangled, William had to scoop Baby in order to get her out? Elizabeth could have, possibly, felt herself being scooped from the inside and out at the same time.
The scooper only hurts for a moment.
It's possible that the nitrogen was able to be pumped in order to preserve Elizabeth. It's entirely possible that her body was still down there in the bunker. We also know Scrap Baby had to return there at some point in order to repair herself, hence the parts of Baby exoskeleton and lights from the control room which weren't present and entered. If, say, she found herself the way Travis did in Alone Together, that could explain why she seems a bit more aware in FNAF 6. The sedative part of nitrogen could have also been utilized by Baby in her plan to scoop Michael, firstly to keep him asleep in Night 4.
You've been sleeping for quite a while.
Then to keep him compliant as they scooped him.
And, as we know, in the canon timeline, it works. Michael listens to Circus Baby, knowing his sister is in there. She doesn't recognize him, though, and just like the others, probably sees him as his father. And Michael gets clued into this. The animatronics, after 4 nights of putting their plan together, and shoving Michael into Golden Freddy, come on guys, finally lure Michael into the scooper. That day, they'd scooped themselves and killed any employees around. They then scooped Michael himself, ready to use him as their cool new skin suit to escape. And it's gonna be a while before any people realize they're gone. They've killed all the employees, and William's dead in a back room. The bunker is hidden. Michael mentions in his phone call that he had to find the place, right where William said it would be. Who's gonna realize what happened until it's too late?
Their plan works for about a week, until the body starts, decaying and vomits up the endoskeleton into the sewers, to skitter around like Pennywise until they get tired of each other's shit.
Then something unexpected happens. Something William didn't anticipate. Michael gets up. And let's talk about why. A lot of people chalk this up to the remnant injector on the scooper, but I really don't think that's it. It may give him the metal necessary to possess a corpse rather than a bot, at least for now, but the remnant itself isn't his own. It's someone else's remnant in him, not allowing him to possess himself. The remnants of Ennard's metal might help, but it really seems that the possession wasn't an accident. It was Michael himself. Michael forces himself back into his own decaying corpse out of sheer determination and sheer fury. Let's really look at Michael's message to his dad.
Father, it's me, Michael. I did it. I found it. It was right where you said it would be. They were all there. They didn't recognize me at first, but then they thought I was you. And I found her. I put her back together, just like you asked me to. She's free now. But something is wrong with me. I should be dead, but I'm not. I've been living in shadows. There is only one thing left for me to do now. I'm going to come find you. I'm going to come find you.
The first part of the quote is said sadly, desperately. I did it. I did what you asked me to do. I did it well. I did what you wanted. Just like I did when I was a child at home trying to avoid your anger. I did it. Right where you said it would be. I should have made you proud. But then I realized who was there. They were all there. All the souls you killed. The ones I didn't think were inside this bunker. And they thought I was you. Michael says this with a lot of emphasis on you, hinting at a dark amusement followed by a scoff. He lets out a half laugh, half sigh, disdainful. This could also read as a cough, I guess, but our boy isn't breathing by this point, so I don't think he would need to. He then says she's free now. In saying that, it's become clear that despite Elizabeth and the Fun Times literally ripping him open, he doesn't seem to blame them for what's happened to him. He's not saying she escaped or she did this to me, only that she's free now, because he doesn't blame her. He is okay that his sister is free. What he's not okay with is the next thing he says. Something is wrong with me. I should be dead, but I'm not. I've been living in shadows. Then, there is only one thing left for me to do now. I'm going to come find you. The line is repeated for emphasis, and the second time it's said slower and with more venom. A lot of venom. On the FNAF wiki, it's marked as ominous voice. It is not a simple self-invitation. It is a threat.
I've had people tell me he sounds confused in this section, but it does not sound like confusion to me. The only real confusion I can kinda hear is in something is wrong with me, but that is probably just on the grounds of I should be dead, but I'm not. What he is not confused about is what happened before the scooper. He recounts in the call that he remembers what his father said to him, the mission given to him, the events leading up to the scooper, the fact he was killed and Ennard escaped, and the fact he is still here. He is not confused on that. He is very, very certain. What is even more certain is that he is going to find William.
When he says that, it's not him simply telling his dad he's heading over to ask what the fuck was up with that bunker. He's not going over there to find Elizabeth with him. He's going over there to punish him. Because Michael is the one he should not have killed.
Newsflash, asshole! I've been
The one you should not have killed.
the entire goddamn time! Then why wouldn't you say something? Because I hate you! Oh!
So, here's the thing. We discussed in part 3 how Cassidy is the name of the crying child, not a separate missing child. Does that make the crying child the vengeful spirit? It's possible. His dad is putting his spirit through a lot of shit and terrorizing quite a few people in his name. But the bits of evidence toward that pale in comparison to the idea of Michael Afton as the vengeful spirit, as the one William should not have killed. Sure, William may not have killed him directly, he may not have wielded the knife or the scooper or whatever, but the way Michael says it was right where you said it would be, they thought I was you, followed by a scoff, and just like you asked me to, this all tells me there is another thing he is certain of, that William knew this would happen.
William knew where the location was, and that he was sending Michael to his death. The animatronics wanted to kill him, and Michael looked just like him. William knew that if he went down, they would find a way to kill him. But he wanted Elizabeth put back together because she was a child he actually cared about. He did not care about Michael. He blamed him for killing Cassidy, and if again we take the Midnight Motorist minigame and questionably canon books into account, he was openly abusive towards him. So he decided just to train Michael for Elizabeth, send him down to finish his work of putting Elizabeth together, and let the animatronics do what they will. Turns out their plan worked out just as William wanted. Michael was dead, Elizabeth was free. But Michael came back, and Michael was pissed. Man was pissed enough to possess himself. When he says, there is only one thing left for me to do now. That is the unfinished business tethering him as a ghost. He has one thing left to do on Earth, and it is giving his father some good old karma for sending him to a painful and violent death. His father had kept him entangled in this web of insanity for far too long. Michael was killed because of what his father had done, and because his father had sent him down there, knowing what was going to happen. Once again, William did not set off the scooper himself. That was Ennard, the conglomerate of Elizabeth and the other victims. But they killed Mike because they had been killed by William. After he killed them, they were confused and scared and killed Mike in order to escape their torment. They killed Mike thinking he was William. and thinking they were using their killer's skin to escape. Does this make them completely innocent? No, not really. They killed at least 2 technicians, and God only knows what they were up to in between FNAF 5 and 6. But that does not mean Mike will blame them over William, when he knows William is the one who killed them. William is the one they intended to kill, and William is the one who knew all of this and still sent Mike down to die. He sent Mike down because he did not care about his son, and he was fine with him dying if it meant getting his precious Elizabeth back, or getting his experiments going again, whatever motive you choose to read for him. He sent Michael down into a bunker full of people he killed who wanted revenge on him, and in that way, he killed Mike. So Michael was killed by William's actions. He was angry enough to possess himself about that and track William down. He is the one William should not have killed.
Another thing we know for certain is that he possessed himself for a long-ass time. FNAF 3 is stated to be set 30 years after Freddy's closed. Sister location seems to occur pretty soon after that same closure. Michael walked around as a corpse for potentially decades, without giving up, without moving on, because he knew it was time to find his dad, stop what he was doing, and make him understand the pain he'd been put through. I don't know about you, but that sounds like a very determined and vengeful spirit to me. Honestly, he was a vengeful spirit in the games themselves before facing old man consequences and walking backwards into hell.
It is highly speculated and highly likely that Michael was the night guard in FNAF 3. This would, retroactively, explain Springtrap's odd jump scare, looking for more like confused recognition than outward animosity. And again, the logbook places Foxy, who's heavily associated with Michael, in specifically the FNAF 3 guard position. This would also imply that the fire in FNAF 3 was intentional, in an attempt to fully remove William from the equation. Mike really said, "I'ma set my dad on fire," and then did it more than once like the icon he is.
But where he fails to kill William, Henry picks up. That's right, it's time for Henry to get his ass back in the story! Get on in here! How'd he get out of jail? Fuck if I know. I mean, it seems like he finally pieced together William was the killer, figured out about the possession stuff, and went on a tirade. The question is, did he escape? Serve his sentence? I don't think he served his sentence. Child abduction in Utah is 15 to life, and 5 kids went missing. He ain't getting out of there in time. Good behavior, maybe? I don't know enough about jail. I'm too good about evading the law. Maybe when William tore apart the animatronics, he put the bodies or bones somewhere they got found and identified. Honestly, what we think is most likely is that the cops finally tracked down that secret bunker, saw all the blood and guts, and were like, oh, yeah, it was William. Yeah. But the important thing is Henry gets out, and Henry gets to work.
He figures out about the murders, about the possessions, and that the animatronics are still out there and fucking around. And after spending decades serving for a horrible crime he didn't commit, knowing that is what kept him away from his daughter that fateful night, he knows it's time to end it.
So he opens a Freddy's, probably under a fake name considering everything. But he takes that Fazbear package and shops out for a manager while he gets the trap ready. He turns the building into a labyrinth to trap any animatronics that make their way in there. He builds Lefty, or rebuilds him out of Connie, but that's a whole different story, solely to capture the puppet. Wherever the fuck Charlotte's been hiding! Honestly, if I had to guess, she may have been trying to find Cassidy's body all this time, to finish giving gifts and life to the last victim she knew of. As for the other animatronics, we know from a secret dialogue from scottgames.com that Ennard split into Scrap Baby and Molten Freddy after they decided Elizabeth was kind of a freak and voted to kick her out of the hive mind.
You are crowding us.
Be quiet.
You can't tell us what to do anymore.
Yes, I can. You will do everything that I tell you to do.
We outnumber you.
That doesn't matter, dummy.
We found a way to eject you.
You would be lost without me.
Say goodbye to our friend.
The split, however, clearly fucked them up quite a bit, as Molten Freddy is nothing but a mess of limbs causing problems, and Scrap Baby has, like Michael before her, reverted to, okay, let's just do whatever Dad says. As Henry references her not remembering her own name, it's likely she's fallen into basic instincts. Attack things that move, keep self alive, make Daddy proud of me. It's been often speculated that she may have had this agenda the whole time, but really, I don't see why she'd kill the guy she thinks is her beloved dad. Ennard's whole plan was to stay in that body. She didn't know how decaying worked. But her dad's here now too. Say hi to Scraptrap.
As we discussed in part 3, Scraptrap definitely seems to have repaired himself from the FNAF 3 fire using Fredbear's parts. I mean, it's his secret bunker. He goes down there only to find Fredbear is just as still and unmoving as he always thought it was. He never saw it move, never realized Cassidy was in there all along, and it infuriates him enough to finally rip apart the thing that killed his son and stick it to himself.
Only Cassidy is in there, and he's been in that bunker for decades alone and undiscovered. The spirit inside has been wandering the same halls, the same memories, for years upon years, and can't put up a fight. Scraptrap makes his way to the restaurant to continue his reign of terror that started with this suit, with putting Cassidy inside and letting him be broken further in hopes of putting him back together, ruining so many lives in the process, including his, and including Michael's. And he's walking right into Michael and Henry's trap.
When Henry gives his final monologue, he implies that he's figured out who the guard was, and it was someone who he didn't expect. The guard found a job listing not intended for you. Henry didn't know what happened to Michael, and he didn't want to bring him into this, just hoping he'd moved on with his life. Unbeknownst to him, Michael was unable to, and so he found the Freddy's location with familiar animatronics in the back alley and Henry's voice on the tapes, and took the job knowing how it would end. Henry says he left a way for the guard to escape, but realized that he's where he wants to be. This means that Henry was not in communication with Michael, but figured out his intentions there pretty quick. And yes, Michael intended to follow Henry's plan and free all of them in a fire. But he wasn't going to let his dad go that easily. Sure, he let the other spirits leave. He let his and his dad's spirits leave. He'd been a dying body for years, and Scraptrap couldn't remain to cause any more harm. But Michael had spent decades living in the shadows, surviving off of one sole goal. He was a walking corpse fueled by the hatred of his father. He's been hunting him the whole time, and he's not letting him go now. So he follows his soul to hell and takes control. He tailors a torture just for him.
And if you ask, how can he do that? Same could be said for Cassidy. They're ghosts now, they can just do things, I guess.
Of the few things we know about the Vengeful Spirit and Ultimate Custom Night, we know that it was a victim of Williams, and that he had been in the FNAF 6 fire.
He's here and always watching. The one you shouldn't have killed. Greetings from the fire, and from the one you should not have killed.
He refers to Henry in the third person, saying,
He tried to release you. He tried to release us. But I'm not gonna let that happen. I will hold you here. I will keep you here. No matter how many times they burn us.
This means the spirit is not Henry. It's not Elizabeth, who was on her dad's side at the time she finally died for real. We also know it's not Charlotte.
I don't hate you, but you need to stay out of my way.
Whether she's talking to the player or the spirit running the hell is unclear, but stay out of my way is a hell of a thing to say to someone you yourself are keeping prisoner. Scratch Charlie.
The only other people in that fire were the Molten MCI, about half the remains of Cassidy, and Michael himself. As we mentioned, it doesn't make narrative sense for the super powerful vengeful spirit to be random kid we never talk about. Cassidy is a solid maybe, but the evidence for Michael? Ooh boy!
It doesn't track in a narrative sense for the big good to be some background character, but to have it be the son of the killer, the victim of his lifelong abuse who was killed brutally because of him, to have the spirit attacking the story's villain over and over be the character we have been playing as for several games. We were Michael for FNAF, if not all of them. If he was Fritz Smith, we played as him in FNAF 2. He could have been the guard in FNAF 3. He knows Nightmare Fredbear, so he went through FNAF 4 like we did. He was definitely the protag in 5 and 6. We've been Michael the whole time. So why stop now? Why not end the series with the man we began it with? Why not end Aftons' reign by the hand of the one who, no matter how accidentally, started it?
Symmetry, my friend!
Who the hell?
Michael checks several boxes of what we know of the spirit. He was in the fire, he blames William for his death, he's pissed as hell, and he's determined enough to be the one that William should not have killed. As mentioned, that's not a morality assessment, it's a statement of this is the one that was going to come back and get you at the end. And he said, over and over, I am going to come find you.
I'm going to come find you.
The only thing that doesn't 100% line up is the spirit being portrayed as a child, but even then, there's a ton of explanations. Either using Cassidy's likeness as part of his taunt, or he's reverted into his younger self. The little boy who got abused and neglected and locked into nightmares. The little boy who died with Cassidy. Now think of important lines in Ultimate Custom Night.
Shh. I've been looking for you.
answer eventually.
I'm going to come find you.
When I'm here, you play by my rules. This time, death cannot save you.
Really interesting that Nightmare Fredbear uses the phrase "put you back together," something Michael quoted directly back to his father.
Let me put you back together, then take you apart all over again.
Speaking of the nightmares, most of them have lines relating to, guess what? I'm real this time. Almost like the spirit is someone who'd seen the monsters back when they weren't real. But they're real now, and just for Will.
I assure you, I am very real.
I am given flesh to be your tormentor.
This time, there is more than an illusion to fear.
But most importantly, Nedbear, overlaid with the voice of the vengeful spirit itself, says,
This is how it feels, and you get to experience it over and over and over again, forever. I will never let you leave.
This one is definitely attributed to the spirit, as its voice is overlaid. What is it exactly? Death? No, William knows how it felt to die. He got killed by the Springlocks. He doesn't need a personal hell to tell him that. Instead, he needs to be told how it felt to play FNAF. Michael went through at least 3 of the 6 games, most likely all 6, over and over and over again. The vengeful spirit knows how it feels to be in this office. The MCI wouldn't know that. Charlotte wouldn't know that. Michael would. Because Michael was almost always the main character. The entire series has been him chasing his father, and now his father has to deal with what he made Michael deal with.
But why, you ask? Wouldn't he just let William's soul pass on? Surely he'd know he'd just go to hell? That's eternal torment already. Sure, yeah, let's assume that. But Michael doesn't just want William to go to hell. He wants to torture him himself. He's been hunting him for decades, and he wants his vengeance. Revenge is a funny emotion. It is anger that demands an outlet. When you've selected an outlet and that outlet is not available to you, the pain does not go away. Michael's been looking for his outlet for a while, and once he has it, he will not let him go. He's going to make him suffer, as his father made him suffer through his entire life and afterlife. He didn't get to be the one to burn his father, so he's going to be here to burn him over and over and over again. Which is what leads to the Old Man Consequences scene. If you select nothing but Old Man Consequences in Ultimate Custom Night, you get a cutscene referencing FNAF World, in which your pixelated self approaches Old Man Consequences fishing at the lake. The man says,
"Come and sit with me for a while."
If you do, he says,
"Leave the demon to his demons. Rest your own soul. There is nothing else."
Also note that if you speed up the background audio, you can hear screaming, which sounds an awful lot like Henry Michael Help. There's been theories that Old Man Consequences is Henry. They speak in a similar manner with similar sentence structures and vocabulary.
In general, with the flip side under account, and seeing how these motifs are so closely associated with Henry, I have a hunch that Henry is Old Man Consequences.
And if we go with Raito's theory that FNAF World is Charlie's way of helping the children pass on, it would make sense for him to help her. His daughter won't move on until everyone can, so he is there to help her. And he will sit at the lake and wait for Michael, a child he once knew, to tell him to rest like the rest of them. Which would imply that when William is screaming for help in the cutscene, he is screaming to the 2 people who are actually there. The 2 people in the cutscene. Henry, the Old Man Consequences, and Michael, the Vengeful Spirit.
Anyway, what happens when you speak to Old Man Consequences? Well, the game will crash. Because that's the thing about revenge. Once you get it, it doesn't stop the anger. It does not stop the pain. Michael is in an eternal cycle, able to take out his anger on his father as much as he wants for as long as he wants. Over and over. But it is not soothing his soul. It is not quelling 30 years of anger, 40 years of anger, however long he's been angry. It is not giving his soul the rest he needs. William will be tormented with or without him, and he needs to move on from his father's hell. But Michael does not think he deserves to. Let's look at one of Withered Bonnie's lines.
What is this new prison? Is it me trap or is it you? Perhaps it's us both.
Let us not forget one thing. Michael did help kill the crying child, and the number that must have done on his mental health is exponential. We know from the epilogue of the game how devastated he was.
When William reached out to him to bring Elizabeth back, as we mentioned, a possibility of redemption for Cassidy may have been the dangling carrot in front of him. But it didn't bring back his siblings. It just caused more problems, and caused Michael to shamble around as a zombie for decades. There's probably some part of him that thinks he deserves this as much as William does. It may have ultimately been William's fault. Michael may have acted out because of how William treated his children. He may have been the one to create Fredbear's Diner, but Michael was the one who shoved his brother into a bear's mouth. Michael dragged his dad to hell and then trapped himself there, supposedly in order to torment him over and over again. But instead, he's tormenting himself over and over, because he still blames himself and is punishing himself for what he did. Is it me trapped, or is it you, he asks. Perhaps it's us both. This is a torment cycle for both of them. William is obviously getting the shit beaten out of his soul, but Michael isn't doing too hot either. That's why Old Man Consequences tells him to leave William and rest his own soul. Michael doesn't think he deserves to, which is why he won't.
The theme music of Ultimate Custom Night, or at least the menu music, is entitled Isoptrophobia, which is a fear of mirrors and reflections. Could this be referring to Michael fearing looking in the mirror and seeing his father, or seeing a robot or corpse instead? Or could this be referring to William refusing to reflect on himself, on the horrible things he's done? This is the theme of the entire game. It's got to be important that it's named this. William's hell is seeing all his crimes and mistakes reflected back at him. He sees the monster he's become. He sees himself as Springtrap and Scraptrap. He sees his murders, he sees his failures, and when he completes 50-20 mode, he sees the moment he killed the son he promised to put back together.
That scene of Fredbear twitching is not saying that Golden Freddy is the spirit. It's showing us the spring-locking of Cassidy, and that's not all it is. When William completes 50-20 mode, he is greeted with the vision of the worst mistake of his life. And what's the best/worst part? Michael is showing this to him. Michael, who had done everything he said in life. And why? Because he killed Cassidy. In a way, he did, of course, but Cassidy didn't die from the bite. He died from what William did to him after. William was the one who killed Cassidy and then gaslit Michael into wallowing in guilt for his entire life. And in finding out his father was the one who killed Cassidy, Michael was able to realize that his father was behind everything else.
All this to say, this doesn't mean that Michael is going to stay in hell forever. That's a pretty downer ending for our protagonist. We have to remember that Old Man Consequences is there too. He tells Michael to leave and rest. He has the possibility to do so. He can do so. And one day he may. And with Golden Freddy telling him over and over that it's me, reaching out to him again and again, I think his little brother may be the one to bring him to peace, to ease his soul and put him to rest.
And narratively, doesn't it feel complete to have the same protagonist in the first and last of the game of the original timeline? Speaking again of narrative significance, what is the point of Michael? What's the payoff for I'm going to come find you if he just lets William go at the end via Henry's hand? Why introduce him, imply he's the main character of most of the games, and then just kill him immediately? The reason is that Michael is the through line of all of these games. We start these games as Michael, we end it as Michael. Just as all of this started with Michael and William's sins against Cassidy, and ended with their hell for each other.
As for the other spirits, William is, as deserved, suffering eternally for his crimes against humanity. I really want to draw attention, though, to the Sisyphean imagery of Ultimate Custom Night here. The original Tale of Sisyphus has him drawing the ire of the gods for killing his guests, but then evading death by locking it in a chest. Even after death escapes the chest, Sisyphus manages to escape once more, but he can't run forever, and when he finally falls to the underworld, he is punished by doing the same task over and over. Sisyphus really be playing 50-20 mode every night, huh?
One must imagine Sisyphus as a yellow rabbit.
And for the children, I mentioned FNAF World earlier, and that really does seem to be the key to freeing the other kids. When Charlotte says, "You need to stay out of my way," it's because she's working on something she can't have angry spirits messing with. What she's working on is freeing the kids, and specifically, Cassidy's spirit. The secret minigames you are meant to complete in FNAF World are, very clearly, setting up the minigames of FNAF 3. The minigames which unlock the happiest day, in which Golden Freddy's spirit gets to have a birthday party. These minigames may or may not be diegetic, but they show how Charlie prepared to set Cassidy free. She collected the other children's souls, shepherding them back after the fire freed them from Ennard but kept them lost. Then they all, together, worked to finally free Cassidy. In We Solve the Ghosts of Freddy's, Rytos brings up that the end of FNAF World involves the player going into the middle of the woods, and then the game suddenly ending. Their interpretation is that it's not just any spot in the woods. It's the crying child's unmarked grave. All of FNAF World was finally finding Cassidy's body and allowing him to rest. They find his body, they open the chest, and they give him a party. The party was for you.
The player in FNAF World is probably Cassidy, being shepherded by the images of Fredbear and promises of being put back together. And it works. Though it didn't happen during the FNAF 3 fire, the happiest day either did or will happen. Charlotte brought all the kids together for a final celebration. To give Cassidy the birthday he was denied, and then the balloons drift into the wind, and the spirits move on. All of the kids are safe. So Charlie is safe now too, and with her father. The only one left to move on is Michael, and that's where we leave the pre-Steel Wool story, with the question of whether he will give up his useless pursuit of revenge or fall deeper into the rabbit hole. It ends with a hand extended to Michael, and the question of whether or not he will take it.
But that's not where FNAF's story ends, oh no!
We got more games to merchandise, y'all!
Help Wanted is about to drop and some wild shit's gonna go down.
But that'll be for another video, or videos. God, probably so many videos.
Oh my god.
With a lot more wild speculation, and a lot less this all fits together like a puzzle. But we
Gregory ain't a robot.
But we do want to discuss something. Just one more thing before we finish this essay. And that is...
The fanon version of Cassidy is, well, very popular within the fan base. And why wouldn't she be? We all love vengeful, angry little girls. But honestly, I don't think that's the reason she took off to the point we all forgot she wasn't canon. That was mainly from, pardon the pun, the joy of creation. Fanon Cassidy was a group effort, a fandom baby made from their love of the story being told to them. The love of the tragedy of it all, and of the parts of the story left untold for us to discover on our own. Cassidy, the vengeful Fredbear ghost, is a collective character, and while, as we well established, we don't believe she's canon, we do believe she's special. And we think Scott Cawthon and Steel Wool agreed that she's, well, pretty friggin' cool. Obviously, we can't say for sure, we don't live in their vents.
Though we would if they let us.
But let's look at some of the elements of the fanon's Cassidy and see, well, if it describes a certain someone who has been introduced within the Glitch Trap era.
Cassidy is a little girl with dark pigtails. She's a bit hot-headed, a bit socially inept, but she has a heart and a drive for justice above all else. And now she has been wronged, and several other people have been wronged by the same entity. She won't let that stand. She's going to do whatever it takes to make sure justice is served. And if not justice, then vengeance.
What do you like to do for fun?
Vengeance.
Getting a little dark.
Also, she is very close friends with a little brunette boy in a striped shirt, scattered band-aids, and a long-standing, suspicious connection to a golden-colored Freddy Fazbear. That's right. Cassidy the Vengeful Spirit may not be canon. But you know who is?
That was too close. I was almost a Cassie sandwich.
You literally were almost a Cassie sandwich, buddy. What the?
Cassie is going to be canon Cassidy. She's got the hair, including the little ball hair ties that are popular throughout fan art. She's got the golden duo dynamic, though it's a bit reversed with Gregory being the one to first comfort her and being a more scrappy, go-getter action kid. But she's still a loner. She's still got a deep empathy for those other people might not. She sees the animatronic suffering and feels bad for them. She wants to help them, and she wants justice. But, well, whether her vengeance quest will be directed at the program that caused all this destruction, or at the boy she thinks pushed her down the elevator shaft, remains to be seen.
And here's another thing. I think her name actually is Cassidy, not just Cassandra or some other variant. Most of our theories about her role in the story will be for another essay, but here's something important to note. Her father is most likely the player character of Help Wanted 2. That's not a special opinion, most of the fandom agrees on that by now. Another thing we're really agreeing on is that this player, her father, is connected to a certain Bonnie mask. When her father sees an old one, he remarks that it looks familiar. When Cassie finds one, she asks, "What happened to you?" The mask reminds her of her missing dad. The mask is very important in connection to her father. You know who else had a Bonnie mask? An additional question, Who else has a nearly identical color scheme? When asked what makes you so special in Help Wanted 2, the player is prompted to think about what indeed makes Cassie's dad so special. What makes him so special among the other Phas technicians is that he was there. He was there when the original Cassidy died. He helped shove him into an animatronic mouth. He helped start this whole thing. And now he passes the rabbit mask of trauma onto his daughter Cassidy, whom he named after the original Cassidy Afton, letting her fall into the hands of a creature that just loves to make the past repeat. There may not be 2 Golden Freddy spirits, but there are 2 Cassidys.
Maybe just keep her away from Prototype Freddy's stomach teeth for now.
Okay, someone put their persona pointing a gun at me and said, "Show us what's inside the fridge, Wayne." You want the truth? You want the truth? You want the fucking truth? Oh, there is no fridge! I lied!
Wayne, no.
It was never real.